I can tell you're lying, cause when you're in front of me, stutter, 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 stutter. I can tell you're lying, cause when you in front of me, stutter, stutter. Why you lied to me? Stutter, 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 stutter.
Doobie-doobie-doo. 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 I'm your host, sabrinasalvati. Doobie-doobie-doo. Salvati. Doobie-doobie-doo. 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 I'm your host, Sabrina Salvati.
Day in and day out, and have the option of leaving when they don't. That to me made me so upset when I see all of these morally fraudulent media personalities try to ambush those of us who stand in solidarity with Palestine about October 7th and try to demand that we condemn October 7th or we condemn Hamas, when none of them condemned a single thing that happened before October 7th. If anything, they supported it. Massacre after massacre. It's over 70 years of an unbearable cavalry experienced by Palestinians, and they have never been asked to condemn it. They've never asked a U.S. official or Western official or anyone who presided over this catastrophe to condemn it, and we have to condemn something now? It's as if history didn't exist before October 7th.
Welcome to Sabby Sabs podcast. I'm your host, Sabrina Salvati. If you are new, I want to let you know that Sabby Sabs podcast is a part of Revolutionary Blackout Network. You can catch me there on Thursdays for the Sabby and JB show, and you can catch me here on Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, and Sunday. That was Max Blumenthal. Last night, he had an event at the Community Church of Boston. I was there. I participated in a little bit of the Q&A session, actually, right before that. So I gave a statement as well. Eric, my producer, was there with me as well. Very informative and educational conversation there. That's the second talk I was able to go to in 2 weeks. Last week, I went to Miko Paled's talk at MIT about Israel and Gaza. And then I had the opportunity to go to Max Blumenthal's talk. And we actually got to hang out afterwards. This was really fun. We went to Lolita's. I said it was great to hang out with Max Blumenthal. And so you'll see there's Amar, who helped actually schedule that event at the Community Church of Boston. There's Max, of course, and then there's my producer, Eric. So definitely a fun, great time. It's always great when you get to meet people and hang out with them in person. At least I think so, because we're usually virtual. But welcome, guys. It is Friday night. We will do call-in tonight because I haven't done call-in this week, and there's so much that has happened. I'm sure you have things to discuss. But welcome, guys. Shout out to everyone watching on YouTube, Rockfin, Twitter, and Rumble. And we're going to go ahead and get the ball rolling because there's a lot to discuss. We have interesting stories tonight. At least I think we usually do have interesting stories anyway. But first and foremost, shout out to everyone who is a Sabby patron. Thank you guys so much for your support. I really do appreciate it. If you're interested in being a Sabby patron, I have 5 categories: Ultimate, Sabinators, Sabsters, Sabbies, and of course, members. All of their names are listed here. You can also see their names scrolling across the bottom of the screen there on the ticker as well. And I want to give a special shout out to everyone who's a new Sabby patron. Over here, we call them newbies. Let's give it up for Michael Bomer and Edward M. Bier. I think it's Mbier, but I'm like, Mbier. Thank you and welcome to the newbies. All right, guys. Yes. So that's actually why I was not live last night, because I was attending that event. But yeah, guys, let's go ahead and get into the stuff. Let's get into it. Want to go ahead and shout out a new member. Let's give a big whoop whoop to Alejandro Leperon. What's up? And shout out to Sparky for the super chat. Says, hey, Sabrina, love. What's going on, Sparky? Yeah, it's great to be back, guys. I know it wasn't gone long, but it's great to be back. So we're going to jump right in. I want to go ahead and show that beautiful thumbnail so you'll see what we are going to discuss tonight. Ladies and gentlemen, oh my God, so much to talk about. Tonight, we are discussing RFK Jr. versus Crystal Ball. Holy smokes. If you have not seen that interview, that was on Breaking Points. It posted today. We're going to focus on the Israel and Gaza portion. It gets even more cringe, if you can imagine, coming from RFK Jr. We're also going to discuss Joe Biden and Netanyahu upset. Yes, they don't seem to be doing too well right now. We're going to talk about this fizzle relationship between Joe Biden and Netanyahu and the recent statements that Joe Biden has made in reference to Israel. We're also going to discuss Marianne Williamson is wrong. If you are not on Twitter, you're going to get a taste of that tonight. There have been videos that have gone viral from an interview that she recently had with an influencer. We're going to talk about some of the comments that she made. And last but not least, we are going to cover Mayor Michelle Wu is busted. Oh my God, Mayor Michelle Wu. What on earth were you thinking? What were you thinking? We're going to get into all of that. So I want to get started with the first story here. Boston Mayor Michelle Wu. I've talked about her before on this show, about her shortcomings, some of the promises that she made when she was running for office versus the policies that she's implemented once she was elected. But something else has happened, and this is causing quite a stir. It appears that Mayor Michelle Wu was trying to host a holiday party. One of her staffers sent an email invite to Boston city councilors to attend that holiday party. But it sounds like that holiday party was only for certain people. Let's go ahead and get into this clip here from News Nation. Oh, Wu, what did you do?
Well, an errant email leading to an online firestorm and accusations of racism aimed at the mayor of Boston. The mayor is the first woman, the first person of color, and the first Asian American to hold the city's highest post. And she's under fire after an aide mistakenly sent out invites to all members of Boston City Council, inviting them to a holiday party meant to be exclusively for minority members of the city government. Correspondent.
Let's pause there. Look, I understand there are organizations and clubs for people of different races, different backgrounds. I totally get all of that. However, this is a holiday party. So you have to remember all the city councilors, they work for the city, right? And they also work with the mayor of that city. So essentially, this would be similar to if your boss, or let's say your department that you work in, they're doing a holiday party and they invite all of the employees, but they only invite certain employees and you're left out. So again, I support all these different organizations for people that have different backgrounds. I totally get all that. But when it comes to the workplace, you can't exclude other employees and just have a party for certain races. You can't do that. That's not cool. That's not okay. If it were the other way around, and let's say the party was only for the white employees, people would be livid. But apparently this isn't new. According to Michelle Wu, they've been doing this for years. Let's continue.
Elizabeth Pran is live. So, Elizabeth, those invitations ultimately rescinded from these members of council, correct?
Yes, from the 7 members, it was rescinded within about 15 minutes. And Mayor Michelle Wu did admit that the email was not intended for the larger group. She did speak to a group of reporters last night, but she did not apologize. She did not cancel the party, only saying that, as we mentioned, the invitation was intended for just a small group of people on the city council. She told reporters this was an honest mistake done by her team. As you mentioned, the original email was sent by her aide. We can put it up on the screen so you can see just a snippet of it. It says, in part, honorable members, on behalf of Mayor Michelle Wu.
Pause here for a second. The invite to the holiday party was only supposed to go to the city councilors that were people of color. Okay. But her staff member accidentally sent it to everyone. So now the white city councilors, now they know that there is a holiday party, but it's only for the city councilors who are people of color. So this was a oops from Denise, who is the staff member. She made a mistake, but that's not the point. The point is everyone should be able to come to a holiday party. That's the point. So you got to pretend and put yourself in that situation and pretend it happened to you. Here it is. Honorable members, on behalf of Mayor Michelle Wu, I cordially invite you and a guest to the Electeds of Color holiday party on Wednesday, December 13th, 5:30 p.m. at Parkman House, 33 Beacon Street. Please let me know if you plan to attend and if you have any dietary restrictions. Denise sent this to everyone.
Cordially invite you and a guest to the Electeds of Color holiday party. So just to give you an idea of what the city council is made up of, there are 6 minority members, there are 7 white members. Wu telling reporters last night that it is a tradition to have the diverse gathering, and other gatherings will be offered for a much larger group throughout the holiday season. And while some, such as Frank Baker, now he is a Democrat, he is a white man on the city council, he said he was not offended. He wrote in part to the Boston Herald, I don't really get offended too easily. To offend me, you're going to have to do much more than not invite me to this party. But he did go on to say, I find it unfortunate that with the temperature the way it is, that we would further that division. She is getting support from other members of the city council, Brian Worrell, writing in part that this just shows you that Boston's government has all kinds of groups. But here on your screen, this is just what we're seeing in the virtual world. Kelly, there is definitely quite a bit of vitriol. This says in part, if a white mayor had only white party, the screams of racism would be loud. She deserves no less. So if you
that part right there, this is what I was saying. This is why we have to be careful. If it were the other way around, people would be livid. People would be livid. Again, it's a holiday party. Just a holiday party. That's it. Like it's not like I'm inviting people to come to my house and hang out and I'm having a cookout. No. This is a holiday party. Everybody comes to the holiday party. That's how this works. I know. I've been to a lot of holiday parties. Okay. So I'm just thinking about if this happened at Boston University, or if this happened at MIT, or if this happened at other places where I've worked. People would lose their shit. You can't do that.
you look on social media today, you will see a myriad of responses. Of course, we have reached out to the mayor's office. We have asked a little bit more about the party. We have reached out to other council members. We have also asked the mayor's office if this party was taxpayer funded. As of this moment, we have not heard back. Kelly, back to you.
Certainly igniting a firestorm. Elizabeth, thank you.
Thank you for watching. Go to.
Okay. So, and then this is the other part. So Mayor Michelle Wu does respond. Listen to what she said. Boy, I tell you, listen to what she says. I told you she's not having a good year.
All right. Have you seen this? So the mayor in the city of Boston is in some hot water after emailing the entire city council an invitation to a holiday party that was intended for, quote unquote, electeds of color. Now, Mayor Michelle Wu admitted her mistake, but defended the party, saying It was a yearly custom that has been happening for a decade. So she sent this out. There's 15 members on the council, 6 minority, 7 white members, and she sent it to everyone. And now she's saying, "Whoops."
I mean, we've all been there to some degree, sending out an email and we're like, "Oh crap, it should not have gone to all those people." This is a tradition.
It's always email. It is always email that gets people in trouble. I'm not kidding.
And, it seemed like, Hanukkah parties, Kwanzaa parties, gay pride parties, sometimes events aren't for everybody, right? And this is a group that's been meeting, right, for a long time in Boston. It's kind of silly to me.
Anyone can go to a Hanukkah party. Anyone can go to a pride,
Sure,
parade.
I don't think there's.
I've never been to a party that was for diversity, specifically for Black people, that other people weren't able to come to.
But that's what she said, right?
Seen that.
She said.
Well, it wasn't specific to Black people. I think there are 6 total minorities on the council. But either way,
that's
you're
exactly what this is. No, because she sent out the email saying everyone is invited to the electeds of color party, and then she resent the email.
That was the stupid mistake.
Saying, actually, no, some of you are not invited. And so the Babylon Bee had a great headline saying that the KKK closes up shop because the progressive left has accomplished all of their goals. And I think there is something about this segregated, that separate but equal Christmas parties that is just inappropriate for any place, but specifically a government. Government.
It's their city councilors. They're not like, I don't know how else I can really break this down for you. But again, they work for the city. They work with the mayor. We have to be very careful. You guys have to understand Boston is number one. Boston is known as the number 1 racist city in America. Don't believe me? Look it up. We got to be careful here. You can't separate the employees like this. You can't just do. I don't know. And I don't care if it's been a tradition. You got to be careful. We're already known, this city in particular, we are heavily known for segregation. We are heavily known for racism. That's what we're known for. It's not just the sports teams. We're known for that. So and we're known for structural racism in this city. That's what so the number of times I've heard people over the years saying that we need to find ways to desegregate this city and to integrate it more. You can't do that if you keep separating people. That's the point I want to get across. And for people who are telling me, no, Sabby, you got to think about it this way. No, unless you live here, don't come to me with this mess. Just don't come to me. And I want to be very clear, and I'm going to show you something in a second. Don't think for a second that this is Mayor Michelle Wu letting you think that she cares about people of color in the city, because I'm going to show you a video that debunks that. She does not care about people of color in this city, particularly Black people. And I'll show you some of the things that she has not been doing as mayor. So we cannot be fooled.
Legally cannot do that.
Okay, so she fired off the email. What should she have done after that?
Invite everyone.
Well, the assistant fired out the email.
Okay, but the email got fired out.
Wasn't. Yeah. Well, they should not have rescinded it. They should have just said, we'd like everyone.
Invite everyone.
Just let everyone come.
That would have been a much, a much better cover for herself, but also because I don't think that it was purposely trying to be exclusionary. But once you come back and say that, that kind of throws it up in the air.
Puts on those optics.
All right. Thank you for watching, and make sure you go.
Okay. Because when I told people I was going to talk about this story, somebody was like, well, Sabby, she's trying to, help and do things for marginalized groups in the city. No, she's not. She's not. And I'll show you now. I'll show you. Let me go ahead and let me sign it. Because this is a mess. I got to sign into a lot of things sometimes. But this is a mess. People have to understand, we don't need any more division in this city. Not in this one. Because of what we're known for. Oh my God. We'll just do it this way. I'm going to do screen share. Okay. I want you to see this clip that I have here. Let me make sure the volume's on. Okay. A couple of weeks ago, I went to interview tenants here in Boston. It's not the first time. It's not the first time that I've done that, but I've interviewed tenants here in one housing development that is particularly bad. And I've seen different ones, but when we talk about the Mildred Healy apartment complex, it is particularly bad, formerly known as Bromley Heath. Mayor Wu knows about this, knows all about it. The city apparently allocated $50 million to fix up this complex. Nothing has been done. So I want to show you, we're going to share my screen because I want to show you my point that I'm trying to make. This is not about, this party is not about Mayor Michelle Wu trying to look out for Black people or marginalized groups in the city, because she's not. She has not been. Look at this. Sorry, Eric told me there was no sound. Let me bring it back. Sorry. Eric, I tried to put this in Type VNC, but it wanted me to log in and all that stuff. Oh, I forgot to hit share sound. Sorry. Okay, you'll be able to hear it now. Listen to this.
I hope they're not trying to push us out to bring a different, generation bracket in here. You know what I mean.
Gentrification.
Gentrification. Thank you. Yeah, I really do, because you know what I mean? Like, it's like we shouldn't live like this.
I'm in another apartment now, and I want to show you again another issue with the bathroom. So again, this is mold.
Yeah.
This is not,
they keep painting.
spots. This is not dirt. This is all mold on the ceiling. Wow. And look over here. Look at that. Look at this. So
that's black mold. Okay. I asked Mayor Michelle Wu about this in person. If you look on my channel, you go back. If you look under the tab that says on the ground, that category, you got to go further back. I asked her about this particular complex in person. I want to say that was either earlier this year or last year. She told me in person, you'll see it on the video, there was $50 million allocated to help rebuild this community. Nothing's been done. What has been done with that $50 million? Would you want to have to take a shower in this bathroom with black mold? Do you know how dangerous this is if you have asthma? If you have respiratory problems? There was a woman who died at this complex because of the mold. So for the people who were coming to me saying, oh, Sabrina, she's trying to do a separate holiday party because she's trying to, look out for Black people and marginalized groups. No, the fuck she's not. These are the things you don't see. When you come here as a tourist to Boston, these are the things you don't see. These are the people you don't see. The tour buses don't take you to these parts like Jamaica Plain, parts of Dorchester, Mattapan, Roxbury. They take you to the gentrified parts. So you don't see this. This city gets a lot of money. So why is she letting these people live like this?
So that is very dangerous. And I'm not gonna stay in too long because so every time, like if you're taking a shower, you're breathing this in. This is very dangerous. So that is considered to be a health hazard. And then here too, going into another room here, they painted over this. Yeah. So they just painted over this, just paint. You see what they do? This ceiling is falling apart.
Yes.
Right there.
I see it.
All of that.
They think they go to fix painting and put it in place,
Yeah, and so you've seen a lot of things today. One of the biggest concerns I do have is the mold, particularly because it's black mold. And it is one of those things like you're breathing in that, and that can cause other health issues such as asthma. It can cause lung issues. I started to notice it a little bit. I started to get a little little fuzzy or a little lightheaded, and I wasn't even in there long. So that right there lets you know. So I think the thing is this is what happens when you don't take care of mold. It will spread. Painting it, putting plaster over the wall does not get rid of the mold. And from what I've seen, the buildings that I've gone into, it is very apparent that the mold is spreading throughout the building. It's not just in one person's apartment. So I don't know what the city plans to do. There was $50 million that was allocated towards some parts of Bromley Heath. It doesn't look like it's been used yet. But again, I don't know what they're planning to do, but I have a strong suspicion that the plan is to let the buildings fall apart, to push the people out, to demolish this entire complex and build something anew, probably something gentrified.
And that's what she's been doing. When you're talking about the communities of color, that's what Mayor Wu has been doing. You got to understand that was one of the number one things that she promised to fix when she was running for office was the housing situation here. That's just some of it. You go watch the whole video and you'll see all the other stuff, but that's just some of it. But people have to understand, again, this woman, this is all a fraud. This is a front. And when she was running, people were like, we could have the first woman of color in this position ever. Yeah. And what is she doing for the people who are like her? What is she doing for marginalized groups? Nothing. You got to understand she's letting these properties fall apart. So again, this type of complex is not something where they have like a private landlord and the landlord will come and fix it. No, the city is responsible. So this is on her. And she said there was $50 million. Nothing has been done. So don't think that just because she's having a holiday party for the employees that are people of color, don't think that means that she cares about those people, because all of her policy actions have shown you that she does not. She's another one that is sold out to the real estate investors. Tia knows. So Tia lives in that complex. Tia said the black mold is deep in the walls. One of the walls were cut open and there were spaces with the mold. The whole thing has to be rebuilt. So Mayor Wu, no, honey, no. I warned people about her. Eric Gray says capitalism as a system is anti-life. Rondo says Mayor Wu is a model minority working towards being considered a whole white person. Interesting. Thank you for the super chat medal. My dad almost died from black mold. It's scary shit. The fact they covered it up is immoral. That's right. And thank you for the super sticker, Ali Diaz. And shout out to Timothy Onuki for becoming a Sabby member. Give Timothy a big whoop whoop. You got to be careful with some of these people. They're like, we're representation. And don't do anything for those marginalized groups that they said that they were going to do. Not a good look for her on that one. Not a good look. Let's go to, I thought I saw one I was going to highlight really quick, and then we'll go to the next story. Yeah, Multi-Mind said, what's weird is that in other parts of Boston, simultaneously, people are spending small fortunes or fortunes on baubles. It's not like the money simply isn't there. That's right. We have plenty of money. Now we're going to go into our next story here. Now, this is about Joe Biden and Netanyahu. I'm not sure if you've been paying attention to the more recent news. Now, obviously, we've talked about the fact that Joe Biden's approval rating, of course, has continued to decrease. Part of that now has to do with the war between Israel and Gaza. But more importantly, now the death toll has risen. Last I saw earlier this morning, they're saying that 20,000 Palestinian civilians have now been killed. So the death toll, like I told you, over the next coming days, it is going to continue to increase. Expect the numbers to be higher than what they're telling you because they haven't found everyone that's in the rubble yet. So that's typical with any war. But the number of civilian casualties with this one and the fact that the people cannot get out, that's what makes this one more devastating than others. Because again, they're fenced in. So it has finally gotten to the point where Joe Biden is actually starting to warn Netanyahu that Israel is losing support. So you need to make a change within your government. I have two clips here. The first one we're going to bring up is CNN. The second one is a panel. Let's go ahead and dive into this.
Our world lead now in a growing public rift between President Biden and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu this afternoon. The White House desperately trying to clean up Biden's comments after he told supporters on Tuesday that Israel's offensive in Gaza is, quote, indiscriminate, the bombing indiscriminate, while publicly other Biden administration officials have been insisting that Israel's intent is to limit civilian casualties. Joining us now, senior writer on Israeli and American politics for the Israeli newspaper Haaretz, Alon Pinkas. He's also a former ambassador and served as an advisor to multiple Israeli foreign ministers and a prime minister. Mr. Ambassador, thanks so much.
Pause here for a second. So I just want to talk about something here. When Biden says that the bombing is indiscriminate, that is basically Joe Biden telling you that Israel is not trying to minimize civilian casualties, which is what a lot of us have been saying for quite some time, right? It's not targeted. It's not specific. They're not trying to do that. And he's now come on record saying that. So now there's this tension between Joe Biden and Netanyahu. And again, like I said before, had it not been for the mass protests that have happened all across the world, I don't think Joe Biden would have ever made that statement. Now, this gentleman that's on with Jake Tapper, he is a former advisor to Israeli prime ministers. I want you to hear listen to this. Listen to what he says.
For joining us. So in your recent article in Haaretz titled, Netanyahu must be politically destroyed or Israel will go down with him, you lay out the prime minister's missteps in your view with China, Russia, Saudi Arabia, Iran, and the U.S. You say, quote, Netanyahu, always meddling in and manipulating internal U.S. politics, has impressively managed to turn Israel into a wedge issue in Washington, in contrast to decades of sacrosanct bipartisanship. What do you make of how Biden has been trying to handle this relationship and the chasms we've seen bubbling up in recent days, such as Biden, I don't know if it was accidental or not, but Biden saying the other day that Israel was indiscriminately bombing Gaza?
Well, hi, Jake. Well, look, Biden managed this admirably. I mean, I can't think of any other president, Republican or Democrat, that would have handled this in a better way, given.
Pause. So he wrote that article. They were talking about that article. Now he's trying to say, this is what was interesting. Joe Biden has handled this great. And I can't think of any Republican or Democrat who would have handled this differently. Key phrase there, Republican or Democrat. That's part of the problem. Both of those parties are corporate. They're bought and paid for, and they belong to the military industrial complex. So that's one of the problems. The other thing, when he says that Joe Biden handled this well, Joe Biden has not handled this well. Because number one, the first thing that Joe Biden could have said is that we will not be supplying arms to Israel. Just like that. Just like that. If I had to pick a president that I think probably came close to being right on this or doing the right thing, would have been Jimmy Carter. But you see, they got Jimmy up out of there. So for him to say that Joe Biden handled this well, that is a lie. Joe Biden did not handle it well. You should not be supplying arms to Israel, period. We shouldn't be supplying arms to anyone. Let's continue.
And that parallel to this, there's a Ukraine crisis, and parallel to that, there's a China challenge and all that, and other things. But by handling it the way he did, he also put himself in a certain bind. By extending to Israel his generous, heartfelt, unwavering support, by visiting here, 11 days after the war broke out, after the atrocities of October 7th, he positioned himself in a way that he thought in due time would allow him to apply pressure or use levers of power or influence over Netanyahu. What he didn't apparently, what no one in Washington thought would happen is that out of the catastrophe of 7 October, Mr. Netanyahu will go back to his old MO, to his old modus operandi, and try to instigate a showdown with Biden because it helps. He thinks, at least, it helps him politically.
Pause here for just a second. First of all, he brought up the issue with Ukraine. He's like, well, he had to deal with Ukraine too. No, he didn't. Because it's been revealed recently that Joe Biden actually rejected the peace option, even between Ukraine and Russia. So no, he didn't have to do that. Again, it is a proxy war. So there's that. Two, when he says that, well, no one in the Biden administration could have predicted that this was that Netanyahu would do this. Yes, they could have, simply by listening to what Netanyahu has been saying over the years. Netanyahu telling the U.S. government what to do in reference to foreign affairs. Netanyahu showed you who he was from day one. I played a video of Netanyahu back in the 70s. He told you what he felt about a two-state solution. He told you he didn't think the Palestinian people deserved the right to have their own state. They knew exactly who Netanyahu was. So I disagree with that statement as well.
How concerned are you? I've heard some Israelis express this concern that the prime minister is going to continue this war in Gaza longer than it needs to go, because the moment it's over, those crowds calling for his resignation and the political desire to get rid of him as prime minister, and you know this better than I, it's very strong. He's very unpopular right now. I think his approval rating is like 25%. That he just wants to stave that off as much as possible. Do you think he's actually cynical enough that he would extend the war longer than it needs to go so as to stave that off?
Absolutely. On a scale of 1 to 10, he's an 11 in terms of cynicism and the way he's trying to manipulate even the American-Israeli relationship and take advantage and abuse the friendship that Biden extended to him. But there's also, to be fair, extending the war is not his sole decision. There's the military, there's a defense minister, there's a war cabinet in which 2 members of the opposition, both of whom were former IDF, Israel Defense Forces chiefs of staffs. So he's not alone. So I'm not sure he could pull this off. And so while there is a conventional wisdom that he would like to extend the war, the question is, Jake, how do we define the day the war ends? Because it's not going to be a clear-cut day or a clear-cut scenario. The war may change form. It will morph into a low-intensity conflict. Israel will stay in Gaza. It will conduct incursions. It will conduct so-called search and destroy operations against the better judgment and wishes of the Biden administration, at least in terms, Jake, of how they view the so-called day after, or the post-war Gaza, which they don't see Netanyahu as a partner in shaping.
First and foremost, I want to reiterate to people, we wouldn't even be here if it wasn't for colonialism in the first place, right? We wouldn't be here if it wasn't for colonialism. That's why we're here. If we really want to go back and talk about the history, that's why we're here. So you can't take these people out of their homes, push them into an open air prison ghetto, one of the most dense populated areas in the world, and expect them just to be fenced in like cattle and just deal with it. And there's still the issue of the illegal settlements in the West Bank, which are happening right before our eyes. Still happening. It's been called illegal. So if it's been called illegal, this is my question. Who is the person to step in and say, this is illegal, you cannot do this anymore? Because the UN can declare it to be illegal, but then they don't really do anything. The Palestinian people do not have self-determination. And we'll get into this a little bit later when we get into the Marianne Williamson story. But you can't sit there and tell people who are oppressed and occupied to just lay down.
The other thing that's been remarkable is to see the families of the hostages emerge as this potent political force, and members of the Netanyahu cabinet treating them with hostility. Ben Gvir and Smotrich and those others saying, we lost Alon, I think. All right.
Well, I just want to say this. The reason why Netanyahu is treating those families, the family members of the hostages, with hostility is because it was never about the hostages. This is something we said on RBN from day one. It was never about retrieving the hostages. It was always about exterminating the Palestinian people off the land. The settlements in the West Bank have nothing to do with those hostages on October 7th. It was never about that. That was a convenient excuse for Netanyahu to use. But it was never about those people.
Right, well, we'll bring him back at another time and talk.
No, you didn't.
Oh, you didn't? Okay, you're there. Oh, there you are. You're back. I'm
right here.
Okay, good. Well, we lost your visual for a second there, but what do you make of that? I mean, I just, it's obviously very sensitive, and it's not as though, there aren't hostage families in the United States that call out President Biden, because that happens here too. But still, I mean, I got to believe that the heart and soul of the Israeli people are with the families of these hostages.
Notice how when it comes to Israel, he has to believe that the heart and soul is with the people. But anytime when you bring up Gaza, when you bring up the Palestinian people, it's you believe the bad things first, and you may think there's a possibility for some of the good things to be true. This is mainstream media for you. This is what they do. When it comes to the Palestinian people, the bad things are true without a doubt. Without a doubt, we're not going to research it. We're not going to question it. But when there is bad information or bad things revealed about the state of Israel, and they do have evidence to back it up, they always try to sugarcoat it, or they try to make it seem like, well, I can't really believe that this would, they try to make an excuse for them, but not for the Palestinian people.
Look, part of the defining narrative of what being Israeli, what being a Zionist, this entire story here is about, taking care of each other. It's about caring. It's a value in Judaism, and what you see from the government is complete disregard. In fact, it's one of the sources and points of contention between the Biden administration and Mr. Netanyahu, wherein I've heard members of his administration ask out loud, how is it possible that Biden seems to care about the hostages, all hostages, not just those with an American citizenship? How is it that he looks and sounds and acts as if he cares more than Mr. Netanyahu?
We'll pause there and we'll go to the next clip. First of all, I would say Biden doesn't care about the hostages either. Let's not be fooled here. He doesn't care about the hostages either. That's just, again, helping his talking point and helping him in reference to choosing to fund Israel. I want to go to this clip here from Case Study QB about this panel where it says Israel is losing support. Now, that was another statement that Joe Biden made to Netanyahu. He said that Israel is losing support. You have to do something different here. Let's get into that.
I think that we have made it clear to the Israelis, and they're aware, that the safety of innocent Palestinians is still of great concern. And so the actions they're taking must be consistent with attempting to do everything possible to prevent innocent Palestinian civilians from being hurt, murdered, killed, lost, etc.
This warning, those are the strongest words of warning yet from President Biden and other world leaders to Israel, saying Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has to change his approach on the war against Hamas in Gaza. The president told donors in Washington that Israel is, quote, losing international support for the war. Biden called Netanyahu's government the most conservative in Israeli history and added, quote, it doesn't want a two-state solution. And several key U.S. allies are going a step further. The prime ministers of Australia, Canada, and New Zealand say they, quote, support urgent international efforts towards a sustainable ceasefire.
Now, I want to remind you that Joe Biden is saying all of these things, but remember, which country was the one that vetoed the resolution for the ceasefire? The United States. We were the only ones that vetoed that resolution. So see, this is why I say, people, you can't just pay attention to what they say. You have to pay attention to their actions. What matters more, Joe Biden making that statement or that veto that happened at the UN?
Now, Netanyahu admitted that he and Biden disagree on what should happen to Gaza, quote, the day after Hamas, but that he hopes they will reach an agreement. But Netanyahu also rejected the president's call to have the Palestinian Authority play a role in Gaza's future because, according to the prime minister, they support terrorism. Joining us now to discuss all of this, David Sanger, CNN political and national security analyst. He's also a White House and national security correspondent for the New York Times. David, this is episode 7,000 of What the President Says at Fundraisers tells you what the president is actually thinking right now. The candid assessment of where things stand in this relationship and the warnings in that closed-door fundraiser. Were you surprised?
Well, not surprised in that we have seen a ramping up of the public commentary about what's been a really tense set of conversations every 3 or 4 days between the president and Prime Minister Netanyahu. What is remarkable is that the president's out there making the case for $14 billion for Israel for the military actions that need to follow the October 7 events.
Now, I want to remind you, we give them $8.3 billion every year anyway. Okay. So even before this war began.
And yet the prime minister is out openly saying we are not going to go along with the U.S. policy suggestions along here. And let's delineate what they are. They have been repeatedly told you have to be extraordinarily careful about preserving civilian lives as you go about the operations. The Israelis say that they have been, but very few administration officials I run into believe that that has been really the number one priority. The second thing is that Prime Minister Netanyahu has never been in favor of a two-state solution. Yep. That has been the president's explicit goal out here. And to come out, as strongly as the president did was remarkable. So this really tells you about the limits of even a president's influence.
You put it so well when we were chatting in the break that essentially Bibi is asking for $14 billion in aid. And by the way, I'm not going to do what you're saying to do. And it's notable that the U.S. is clear, the Biden administration, they're not going to condition aid to Israel. But there are conditions on U.S. aid to Ukraine right now. Why the difference?
There are conditions on most U.S. aid. I mean, first of all, there are legislative conditions about following humanitarian practices and so forth. They're usually pretty vaguely written, but there are conditions there, including on the Israeli aid. But in Ukraine's case, for example, the president has said explicitly, you cannot use American weapons to fire into Russia. There could be similar restrictions on how they can use American weapons in Gaza. But
pause. He's not really answering that question. The reason why you don't have the restrictions on Israel aid, but you have those restrictions on Ukraine aid, number one, a lot of the politicians in DC belong to AIPAC. A lot of them. We've gone over all the ones that receive funding from. A lot of them are in bed with the Israeli lobby. That's the first thing. So you can't talk about this without talking about the money. You really can't. You have to connect it back. That explains why people vote the way that they do. Joe Biden, if you look at the list of senators back when he was a senator, the list of senators and the list of congressmen and women since 1990, if I remember correctly, guess who took the most aid from Israeli lobby? It was Joe Biden. He has taken the most. So again, if you follow the money, you'll understand why things work the way that they do when it comes to our government. Now, let's go to Ukraine. He can put conditions in reference to Ukraine because the United States government doesn't get anything from Ukraine. They're not in bed with a Ukrainian lobby. It's all about money, 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 people. That's why they vote on legislation the way that they do. They support their donors. And the Israeli lobby is incredibly powerful. So that's what people got to understand. So that's how he should have answered that question.
But politically, no one really wants to go down that road right now. And, you know, I think that gets to Israel's special status, which is long running, and a sense that the October 7th attacks were particularly horrific, and the U.S. is on board with the idea of trying to eliminate Hamas. It's the how. And you remember when the president was in Israel, he said, after 9/11, out of our rage, we made a lot of mistakes. And I think what he's essentially arguing yesterday at that fundraiser is Israel's doing the same thing.
David?
Listen, let me mention this as well. Because this gentleman's very smart. Like, he knows what's really going on here. He's just not going to say it on CNN. Interestingly enough, MSNBC actually did talk about the money issue, all the people that are taking money from AIPAC that are in Congress. But CNN's not willing to go that way. There's a reason why their ratings are as low as they are. But we give them $8.3 billion. For what? Think about what we could do for people in this country with that money. Listen, in Israel, everybody has health care. In Israel, you can go to college for free. You can't do those things here. But we give them that money. We give them the $8.3 billion. Why do we do that? And I don't feel this way just in reference to the state of Israel. I feel this way in reference to any country. We should not be giving aid or weapons to any country. We have to take care of our people first. And our people in this country have not been taken care of. There's one more piece here, and then I want to go to the response that Corey and Rashida gave to Joy Reid.
One of the questions I've had as we've watched this all play out is, you know, the underpinning the Biden administration strategy here, led by the president very clearly, is hug them close to ensure you'll be in the room, to ensure you'll have voices, to ensure you can have influence. What is the U.S. getting out of their requests, out of their asks, that merits the hugging close at this point?
The hugging close has never worked with Bibi Netanyahu. He has always been the exception for all presidents. I mean, remember the poisonous relationship between President Obama and, right? So the only moments it's worked has been, for example, during the Trump administration, when President Trump was willing to give him anything he wanted and asked.
But yet Obama approved so much aid to Israel. The current package was under Obama.
He did. And, you know, there's a long relationship there. It goes back to Harry Truman being the first one to recognize Israel, rightly so, when it was created, and because of its special status in the world.
Wait a minute now. See, this is another thing. The special status thing kills me. Nobody else has special status, people. Nobody else has special status in the world. And he's still leaving out the most important piece. It's not about Obama. It's not about all these other politicians. Well, these people gave this. They had a long-standing relationship. It's not about relationship. It's about money. And the Israeli lobby controls Congress. There was a video that was circulating around on Twitter. I think I played it on the show a couple of weeks ago. Going all the way back to the 70s, Netanyahu was telling the U.S. government what should be done. There was another video that showed Netanyahu telling Congress, you need to take out Saddam. How'd that work out, people? Who is making the decisions? So they always knew who Netanyahu was. Now, those may wonder, what about members of the squad who actually before have reached out or said they have reached out to President Biden? They're now getting bullied from AIPAC. AIPAC is now trying to put up politicians to challenge them for their seats because they're calling for a ceasefire. They're also doing this to Thomas Massie as well, who is not a Democrat. Really interesting as well, because he also does not want to approve the funding to Israel. Listen to what they said on Joy Reid's show. This will tell you what's really going on.
I have had conversations with Bibi Netanyahu, and I want to make sure that we don't forget what we're doing here. We have to support Israel because they're an independent nation that's the brutality, the inhumanity, the way in which the Hamas treated the Israelis. But I think that we have made it clear to the Israelis, and they're aware, that the safety of innocent Palestinians is still of great concern.
That was President Biden yesterday attempting to strike a balance between supporting Israel and protecting Palestinian lives.
Notice how the Palestinians are always second. Israel is always first. When he talks about, he said, this brutal disaster that happened on October 7th, the deaths of the Palestinian civilians exceed that like 100 times. But it's an afterthought, and it's been this way. It was this way before October 7th. The Palestinian people were always an afterthought.
Joining me now is Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib of Michigan and Congresswoman Cori Bush of Missouri. Thank you both for being here. And I do want to start with you, Congresswoman. I want to first ask about your family, who I know are in the West Bank. How are they doing?
I mean, I think, they've lived under occupation for so long, but I know now they see that the world is turning their back on Gaza, and it's heartbreaking for them. But they continue to tell me the instability and the violence within the West Bank had existed prior to October 7th and has just escalated to the point where, they live in complete fear, always checking up on each other, making sure that folks know where, they're going when they're coming back from work. And it's this constant, again, not feeling completely safe.
Yeah. And with apologies, I want to take you back to a moment that is the reason that we wanted to talk with you. This is the day that you were censured, the war at home, we should call it, when you were censured on the House floor. Take a look at what you said at that time.
Palestinian people are not disposable.
Right. This is why I said I don't understand how you can even serve in a party that doesn't even see you as a human being. Because the reality is there were over 20 Democrats that also voted to censure Rashida Tlaib. That's the thing to me, is like, you shouldn't even have to get up there and say that Palestinian people are not disposable. They all took money from AIPAC too.
We are human beings, just like anyone else. The cries of the Palestinian and Israeli children sound no different to me. Why? What I don't understand is why the cries of Palestinians sound different to you all.
And that's Rashida Tlaib playing dumb too. She knows exactly why it sounds different, because of the money. She knows that those politicians are funded by AIPAC. She knows they're in bed with the Israeli lobby. So again, this was another example where I felt like, especially her being the only Palestinian member, she should have just honestly at that point, and they're gonna censure you. Honestly, at that point, you should have threw everything that you had on the table, lay out all of your cards. That's what she should have done at that point in time. But no, even she tried to tame it down a little bit. No, throw these people under the bus. Your family is still occupied in the West Bank. You fight for your family instead of fighting for your seat.
I can see behind you, you're surrounded by your fellow members of the Progressive Caucus, your friends. But more than 20 Democrats voted with Republicans to censure you. Did any of them have a conversation with you? You were so emotional. You have so much to say about your family. Did any of them talk to you before they made that vote?
I mean, a handful. I was completely heartbroken. I did not know that they were going to, stand with the fascist side of the aisle in silence to only Palestinian American, even after we've had heart-to-heart conversations where I tell them I have as much at stake than any other person that continues to believe in certain policies when it comes to Israel and Palestine, because my family is there, and that my voice and my perspective is needed more than ever. And I continue to say, I have an open door policy. Come talk to me. I believe in coexistence. I actually am corny that way, and I really do. I really believe we can have a country that was like when my grandparents were born, honestly, where every faith was welcome, where my grandfather picked olives next to his Jewish neighbor. And that's the dream that I have for the Palestinian people and the Israeli people. And I know we're going to be able to get that, but not in silencing a Palestinian American in Congress.
And you Representative Bush, have been a stalwart standing with your colleague, Representative Tlaib. Talk a little bit about the atmosphere right now inside of the Democratic caucus. There's a lot of friction being reported. A lot of people are saying, no, we're not going to support Biden. There's a lot of friction inside of the party. What is it like inside the caucus right now?
You have people who are, and I'll say it, keeping their distance from us in some ways. But the numbers, initially it seemed like we were all we had. But, every day, it seems like things are starting to open up and we're starting to have more conversations. I will say that within the caucus, we still have, people who believe in not a ceasefire, it's not the time yet, or we want a regional ceasefire, or we want a bilateral ceasefire. They're, using all of these terms to separate. It's ceasefire. Now, what we're saying is a ceasefire is all parties coming together, and so all we want is, regardless of what word you put in front of it, stop the indiscriminate bombing now, and we will continue to have that message. I think that people are starting to see, though, that because the world has come along, we're talking about even in this country, when the King Center, when the Carter Center, when the Pope, is saying, ceasefire, when yesterday, when that the vote, finally, the UN General Assembly, voted for the ceasefire. I think people are starting to see. We're seeing leaders, global leaders from around the world. We're seeing people in the streets. We're seeing that when almost 80% of Democrats in this country are saying they want a ceasefire. So people are starting to change in our caucus. But it's not enough. We need more, because how do we stop the mass casualties that are happening in Gaza without the leaders being the ones who lead?
And I wonder if
I just want to say something here when she talked about the different terms of ceasefire, like bilateral, permanent, and like that is intentional. That is intentional, right? So they come up with different terms around the word ceasefire so that nothing gets done. That's on purpose. And I would expect Cori Bush, having been there as long as she has now, I would expect her to understand how this game works. That's how they stall progress. Now, here comes the question about whether or not they have spoken to Joe Biden.
If there's been a conversation with the White House, the White House has been very sort of condemnatory toward you and toward others, particularly around the from the river to the sea language. And a lot of young people on college campuses use that same language. I want to give you an opportunity to explain what that means when people say that.
I mean, for me and many folks and many of my residents, since they're children, they've been saying it prior to even Hamas even existing, right? I mean, this was a call for liberation. When I remember, because it rhymed, right? And we were marching. It was about true liberation, about coexistence. It was about really loving peace and coming together.
And ending the occupation of the Palestinian people. It's also about that. This will be important because when we get into the next story is the Marianne Williamson story. When we get into that story, I just want you to hold on to that statement that I just said and what Rashida Tlaib just said about from the river to the sea, because that'll be important coming up.
Many of my residents didn't even know that folks thought of it as a different way. And it was the first time they actually heard folks try to vilify it or, and again, for me, though, to try to police me, to tell me what it means to me as a Palestinian. And they know I come from a place of love. They know where my heart is. But again, they weaponized it to try to silence me.
And I wonder has the White House reached out as well? Because it does seem like President Biden is trying to somewhat modulate his tone. Had there been any outreach?
We reached out to the White House. And there were other members of Congress who reached out to the White House when we were called repugnant and disgraceful when we initially called for a ceasefire. We have yet to have that conversation yet. We keep asking for it.
They have yet to have that conversation with Joe Biden. They said that they keep asking for it. Again, I don't know why I continue to stay in this party. Now, I want to show you something that Medea Benjamin revealed, and Joe Biden needs to respond to this. You guys all remember there was this big, to-do about Rashida Tlaib having the Palestinian flag outside her office, right? Watch this. I'm going to show you something because Medea Benjamin, they went to protest outside of senators' offices in reference to the genocide that's happening in Gaza. Watch this.
Our question is to all these senators, especially those who have the Israeli flag outside their door, is there allegiance to us, the American people, or is there allegiance to Israel?
We're going to pause right here and look. So let me ask you a question, ladies and gentlemen. For all the heat that Rashida Tlaib got for having a Palestinian flag outside her office, why is it okay for this senator to have an Israeli flag outside his office, but you can't have a Palestinian flag outside your office when you're Palestinian? For the people who said that the only flag that should be outside the door is the American flag, would you say that to the senator that has the Israeli flag outside his door? His or her door, I should say. And shout out to Medea Benjamin and Code Pink because they've been doing the damn thing.
Having an Israeli flag outside an American representative makes you wonder where the allegiance lies. Does it lie with Americans or does it lie with Israelis? Because our interests aren't always the same. So when I see that flag out there, I am worried that he's not representing me as an American, as a taxpayer. This flag now represents genocide. It represents the death of people. It represents complete occupation and ethnic cleansing and all of the things that I don't believe the United States stands for. So that flag is not representing just a country, it's symbolic. The senator is basically supporting the worst of apartheid in the world.
Every single time Israel incites violence or defends itself, we see an uptick in anti-Semitism. We know that this occupation, this brutality towards Palestinians, it's not safe for anyone. It's not safe for Israeli citizens. It's not safe for Muslims, Palestinians, Jewish people. This is unsafe for Americans now. This is unsafe for everyone. And I don't understand what our senators, the people that we vote in, how do they not understand this?
Significant number of... Well, I just want to correct her on that last part there. They do understand it. They just don't care.
Practicing Jewish people do not support what Israel's doing. They know that what is actually happening, what Israel is actually doing, is anti-Semitic, because that is not what the Jewish faith believes in.
Also, I just want to remind everyone again that Palestinians are Semites. And I will continue to say that until people get it. I'm going to go to some of the comments here, but you see what's happening. So there is a rift there. Netanyahu apparently has this tension now with Joe Biden. We'll see what happens and what develops from that. But I would not be surprised if the Biden administration doesn't convince Joe Biden to retract his statements. It's already in most of the major news outlets already. Shout out to Ali, says USA is a third world country. Abdul says, still, I repeat, there's no doubt in my mind that Jimmy Carter would have handled it better. Jimmy Carter was the one that got the hostages free in Iran. That is true. Thank you for the super chat, P. Smith. Jesus was a Palestinian Jew. Merry Christmas. And thank you for the super chat. Love James. Love you. I think you mean Sabby. Love you, Sabby. Thank you. Thank you so much. Let's go to that comment on Rockfin, and then we'll go to the next story. Thank you for the tip on Rockfin, Skip. Our government knew who Netanyahu was, Black folks knew exactly who Joe was before they voted for him. We are all guilty of all the dead folks in these wars, as well as where we are in our issues of healthcare, prison, jobs, etc. Thank you for this tip as well. Israel claims the best undercover FBI type people in the world. They have undercover people in Hamas and the rest. Bombing wasn't necessary. They could have used their sources to arrest Hamas instead of indiscriminate destruction. A solution now is for the settlements in the West Bank to be given to the displaced Palestinians as a replacement. Thank you so much for that, Skip. Jam. If you have not had a chance to do so, go ahead and smash that like button for me. Thank you very much. Marianne Williamson. Where do I begin? Marianne Williamson had an interview recently with an influencer on Instagram that also was a member of the girl group Fifth Harmony. I'm not sure if everyone realized that when these videos went viral on Twitter last night. It wasn't just myself. There was also neoliberteers. There were several people that retweeted certain parts of this interview, and to the point where it actually said that Marianne Williamson was trending last night because of it. But a lot of people didn't know who this girl actually was. You see, this is Lauren. If you go onto her Instagram page, this woman has tons of followers. And I'm not talking about 100,000 followers here. She is a major influencer in the Instagram space. So when Lauren held this interview with Marianne Williamson, this interview blew up. And if you don't believe me, go look on Instagram and look at the comment section, and you can see what people are saying about Marianne's comments about Israel and Gaza. It's that part of the interview that we are going to focus on. Now, there was one part in particular here that I highlighted. I said, Marianne Williamson, why are you using AIPAC talking points? From the river to the sea does not mean the eradication of Jewish people. This is about the liberation of the Palestinian people. Who's being eradicated right now? Palestinians have no power. I'm going to play this clip. I'm going to show you Marianne's response because she did respond to me. I don't think Marianne realized that I actually watched this entire interview before I even posted that clip. So let's get into this portion here. Again, this is Lauren Jaguaregi. I hope I'm pronouncing her name correctly. Jarugi. And she is interviewing Marianne Williamson. This is the part here about the river to the sea. Listen to this.
And if, anything else, if you're saying from the river to the sea, and that's just an Islamist state, that is calling for the eradication of Israel, and it is calling for the genocide of Jews. And
pause. So first of all, number one, that is a AIPAC talking point. Okay, this is the same thing that RFK Jr. will say. This is the same thing that Bill Ackman will say. This is what you would hear from AIPAC and the ADL and Zionist organizations. Two, she is under the assumption that because they're Palestinian, it is going to be Islamic State. There are Palestinian Jews. There are Palestinian Christians that live there. This is another misconception. Not all the Palestinians that live there are Muslim. People have to understand that part. Let's continue.
I believe calling for the genocide of Jews is just as evil as calling for the as any genocide is not the idea of anyone being told go away, do not exist, is anathema to me. And I hope that you will, I have heard you enough tonight. When you do see, I trust very much your heart and your mind, Lauren. You're very, very smart. And all I can say is I hope that you will go to that part of the world. someday and do see with your own eyes, because I do believe the situation is in many ways, and many of the things that you said, it's like, no, that's not the fact. And I believe that when there is a greater appreciation for the larger story, I believe you will hold it in your heart and will perhaps see some of the things that you just said a little differently.
Okay, so one thing I want to add, when they tell you you should go over there and visit, they're usually referring to Israel. They're usually not referring to Gaza. So Marianne Williamson did respond. Let me show you what she said. Listen to what I said again, Sabby. The quote I used was Sinwar's statement that it would be an Islamist state from the river to the sea. Where do you think Jews fit into an Islamic state? This conversation cannot be about the elimination of anyone. It has to be about justice for everyone. Now, maybe I'm a little bit confused, because I could have sworn I explained this very clearly. This is about the liberation of Palestinian people. Liberating someone doesn't mean you're exterminating someone else. Okay? Let me make that very clear. I don't really know how else to say this and make this clear. And we're going to go to the rest of the video because I'm going to show you again. You'll see what she's talking about. I replied and said, I watched the entire interview. Even the interviewer disagreed with you. This is the same talking point billionaires like Bill Ackman and Zionists are saying. This is not okay. Jonathan came in and said Marianne Williamson was gaslighting that poor girl, and that shows a lack of respect, and that is also not okay. 100%. So to be fair, let's go to the interview. And we're starting with that conversation. And was going to lead up to the point when she gets to the river to the sea. Okay? So let's go to the interview to be fair. Let's see how this goes.
You know, it's kind of like the United States has been normalized, and we don't really acknowledge the fact that indigenous people we still are gentrifying indigenous land and territories to this day. You know what I'm saying? And we still don't acknowledge their rights, and we still violate treaties, and we still take and take and take. And I see this exact kind of mechanism happening with Israel, no matter who is in power. But obviously who is in power right now is a very clear indication of why things have escalated to the point that they have, the gruesomeness of it, the ego-driven reasons. You know what I mean? Because to me, it's like this defeatist energy, or like this idea that we were attacked, therefore we must retaliate in a way that enforces that we are the more powerful being here. And in doing so, have caused incredible war crimes and collateral damage and destruction, complete destruction to the city that is not legally their right. They are.
Notice how, and this is something I want you to pay attention to. Notice how Marianne Williamson cleared her voice. She started to clear her throat when Lauren mentioned the war crimes. This is something I've noticed before that Marianne will tend to do. When it's something that she feels uncomfortable with, she'll do that.
An occupying force in this area, because the original treaties that were drawn up of the two-state solution, essentially, which made sure that the West Bank and Gaza did belong to Palestinians, which already took away the majority of their land and gave it to Israel to begin with. And it wasn't necessarily fair for the Palestinian people, and also did not give them the right to return, because they're not considered equal citizens, and they subject them to, they have to walk on separate roads. They are not allowed access to food and water the same way. And right now their entire city is besieged, and they are quite literally being targeted and moved and centered and cleansed off of this planet. And it's something that we're seeing in real time. And it's to me it is what it is, because I'm seeing it with my own eyes, and I'm also seeing the propaganda, and I'm also seeing the lies and the ways that these things go back and forth.
Notice what she just said. I told you listen, I'm a millennial, but the younger generation, Notice how they're able to pick up on the propaganda. Notice what she said. I see the propaganda.
And I don't know. I feel like a two-state solution doesn't. I actually have this quote from Noam Chomsky here that says, I just want to read it because I think it really like spoke to me when I read it, just like of where a lot of people's minds might be at when it comes to that, is to demand that the Palestinians or Arabs, or if anyone for that matter, accept Israel's right to exist, is to grant Israel something that no state in the international system has. No state is granted a right to exist. They're recognized, but not granted a right to exist. In the case of Israel, that would require the Palestinians to recognize the legitimacy of their expulsion, not just the fact, but its legitimacy. It's as if Mexico were required to accept the right of the United States to exist on half of Mexico gained by conquest. Mexicans don't accept that, nor should they. Almost every border in the world is the result of conquest. The borders are recognized, but nobody goes on to demand that the legitimacy be recognized, especially by a population that was driven out.
So she was quoting Noam Chomsky there.
So for me, it's like when we talk about a two-state solution, and almost every single Israeli official that's in the government right now making these kinds of decisions is very adamant that there is no option for a two-state solution, that it is not an option that they will continue to eradicate, and that their goal is total destruction and devastation, that it is not to target said, Hamas, which if it were the case to do that, they would be moving a lot more strategically militarily. You know what I'm saying? And also, I believe they would be more open to political solutions, like the exchange for permanent ceasefire was on the table via Hamas for an exchange of all I'm saying refugees in my brain, but the hostages,
Prisoners, hostages.
Of the hostages. And the reason the hostages were taken in the first place, we have come to find out through reporting via Israeli reporting, was for them to get hostages so that they can have something as leverage to get their own hostages back.
She even understands that part.
Because there are thousands of Palestinians, many children being detained in Israel right now that are subjected to torture, sexual abuse, and just like insane things. I've just seen insane testimonies, and I've seen documentaries, and I've been reading things by Israeli historians, by Palestinian historians, artists, journalists. It's like, for me,
she's been reading, folks.
I'm so overwhelmed by like, what is it that is really possible for these, and when I see that, it really is about us deciding what we are willing to fight for, and that is humanity, I think, at the end of it and at the core of it. And like you said, the peace that we're talking about, the idea that we have to be proactively creating a peace, and we live in coexistence whether we like it or not at this point, is really what the reality of the situation is. So like, yes, I mean, the idea of a two-state solution to me would also grant Palestinians their right to return and their right to move freely and return to their homes that they were expelled from. But these things I don't see on the table or even a part of the conversation, because so often their plight is minimized to like, oh, Hamas is in control of their entire narrative. But that's not the truth. The people are in control of their narrative right now because of social media. So it's like we're watching active propaganda in contrast to what people are going through and what we're seeing in real time. So I think a lot of people are in a state of kind of confusion and disillusion about like where we really stand on our moral rights, in our actual capacity to see what's going on and to move in such a way that protects all people, all children, no matter what nationality, no matter what they identify as. But I don't see that same respect on both sides at all. I see like a very clear, like, yes, this is the price of this, and this is what has to happen in order for us to survive. And I just don't believe that that's true, I don't believe in the full eradication of a people in order for another people to survive. I don't think
that part right there. I don't believe in the eradication of a people for another group of people to survive.
that that's true. So, I don't know. That was a lot. Sorry. But
the state of Mexico does acknowledge the right of the United States to exist. It it does acknowledge the legitimacy of the state of the United States of America.
So the quote that she read from Noam Chomsky said the Mexican people, not the state of Mexico, right? So you have like the American people and then you have the US government. Do we always agree with what our government says and what our government does? No. So this is where Marianne gets defensive.
And I hope that one day that you will go to Israel.
It says on half of took their land.
They do. I don't care what Noam Chomsky says. Mexico acknowledges the right of the United States to exist. I hope someday that you'll go to Israel. Many of the things that you just said that you've seen with your own eyes, I don't think you've seen with your own eyes.
What did I tell you? When they say you should go over there and see for yourself, they're talking about you going to Israel, not you going to Gaza. So some of these reporters and journalists, investigative journalists have been to Gaza. Dan Cohen has been to Gaza. Max Blumenthal has been to Gaza. There is a difference from what you see in Gaza and what you see in Israel and even the West Bank.
Because some of the things that you just said, and I don't think that I've ever been in my life blind to the faults of Israel. And I haven't been silent about them either. Mm-hmm. But some of the things that you just described were simply not the case. Israel is not an occupying force in Gaza. Israelis can't even go into Gaza.
We'll come back to that one because I have the tweet from neoliberteers. We're going to come back to that one. Let's let this finish first.
Hamas, they cannot even go in. Now the soldiers are in there because of this war that you and I both disagree with.
They're before October 7th.
Excuse me?
They were there before October 7th.
No, Israelis cannot even go. I'm not in any way arguing that the blockade of Gaza was not a good thing. However, Hamas, not all of the misery of the Gazans is due to Israel. And Hamas is an extremely dictatorial force. It has received billions and billions of dollars that they have used for military rather than helping their own people. Many of the things
that's probably because Gaza doesn't have a military. Israel does.
You said, and I don't think we can have like an hour conversation about Israel and Palestine right now, but I would respectfully suggest that some of what you said, including that you've seen with your own eyes, I hope that you will go to Israel because the situation, it's interesting because when you were in that part of the world, and I've been there 5 times, and I've been on the West Bank, and I've been with many Palestinians, I've been with.
Pause. This is the part I think some people got wrong. She never said she went to Gaza. She said she went to the West Bank and she's been to Israel. What people have to understand is the West Bank and Gaza are 2 different things. The West Bank, there are the illegal occupations there. There's still violence there. But when you compare it to Gaza, it is still not on the same level as what Gaza is. I recorded an interview with Norm Finkelstein earlier today. It will post tomorrow. And I did ask Norm Finkelstein about the comments that Marianne Williamson made in this interview. So look for that interview tomorrow with Norm.
Many Israelis. And one of the things that I see there is a much greater sense of the nuance and the complication than is described by people on either side of the conflict talking in the United States today. And not all of this, much of what you said about apartheid in Gaza, Israel's not even there. It is run by Hamas. So
you don't have to be inside of a space to control the space. You know what I'm saying? You pick up on what I'm saying here, guys. You ain't got to be physically inside the space to occupy the space, to control the space. When Israel controls the resources, when they decide what food comes in, when they decide who can come out, if they can come out, if they even need to come out for medical attention, when they control the air, the land, and the sea, when they put people in an open air prison, fence them in like cattle, that is occupation. When they tell you that you have to have a certain type of passport to move to certain spaces and you got to walk on one side of the street or do this kind of thing, that is apartheid.
So Israel, and there are, as I said to you before, the settlements are illegal. I think all those people need to go back to where they came, back to the land of Israel. They do not belong, that land does not belong to them. But what you said in what you were just saying was calling for the eradication of Israel. I remind you that, well, you said that they do not necessarily have a right to exist. And so what I would ask is, I heard you, may I just.
That is an AIPAC talking point. That is not what Lauren said. She said a state. And other people have said this as well. People have said a state. That doesn't mean the people don't have the right to exist. So you see what I'm saying, guys? She's saying some of the same things that you'll see AIPAC say. Just go on Twitter. Go on Twitter. Look at the AIPAC Twitter account. Go onto the AIPAC website. Go onto the ADL website. Same talking points.
Ask you a few questions then. And I don't want to go into, I don't feel that this is the part where we can go into the whole thing. However, when Sinwar said, who is head of Hamas, this is not just about Netanyahu. I've said plenty. I do not agree with Netanyahu.
Okay, this is the part when she's quoting what Sinwar said in reference to the tweet I had.
Sinwar has said, we all saw the video. We will do October 7th a million times if we have to. The whole thing should be ours. It should be an Islamist state. That means the eradication of Israel, and it means the eradication of the Jews. So there are a lot of people here who would prefer not to die among both peoples. And so when you talk about how you don't see how a two-state solution can work, maybe you're right. But I
pause. So first of all, that does not mean the eradication of the Jewish people. They are talking about the administration. They're talking about the government. They're talking about the powers that be. Why not use that same talking point in reference to Netanyahu, who does not want the Palestinian people there, who has gone on record making comments, calling the Israeli people children of the light and calling the Palestinian kids the children of the dark? What are you talking about? Who's the one going to the UN with an entire printout of his plan for a greater Israel, which shows that Palestine is gone, which shows that Israel has expanded into parts of Lebanon and Syria? Who's doing that? Sinwar or Netanyahu?
I think both peoples have a right to exist. Both peoples have a right to live. And I do not believe that every problem stems from the activity of the Israelis. And I think that the Israelis do have some legitimate claims of where there have been efforts. And if, anything else, if you're saying from the...
Okay, here's the part that I clipped that she's now trying to say she was quoting what Sinwar said. Listen.
River to the sea, and that's just in Islamic.
Let's go back just to be fair. Listen to this.
That every problem stems from the activity of the Israelis. And I think that the Israelis do have some legitimate claims of where there have been efforts. And if, anything else, if you're saying from the river to the sea, and that's just an Islamist state, that is calling for the eradication of Israel, and it is calling for the genocide of Jews. And so
even if she feels she's now continuing on what Sinwar said, what she said mad minutes ago, if she feels she's trying to continue on what he said, listening to this, can't you tell she agrees with the statement? Let's let her finish. Because you ain't going to throw all this on Sinwar.
That every problem stems from the activity of the Israelis. And I think that the Israelis do have some legitimate claims of where there have been efforts. And if, anything else, if you're saying from the river to the sea, and that's just an Islamist state, that is calling for the eradication of Israel, and it is calling for the genocide of Jews. And I believe calling for the genocide of Jews is just as evil as calling for the genocide is not the idea of any.
See how she gets flustered here? So the thing is this, Marianne believes that. She believes what she just said, whether it's coming from Sinwar or someone else, whatever. She believes it. She believes that by using that statement, that's what you're calling for. I've been to multiple protests in reference to this issue. That statement existed a long damn time ago, all right? And you didn't have a problem with that statement when it was the Israelis who said it. You didn't have a problem with it. You ain't no problem. Now, all of a sudden, you got a problem with it because Palestinian people are saying it. And as Rashida Tlaib told you in the other clip, they've been saying that since he was a kid. And that is not what it meant. That is the same thing that AIPAC is saying. That is the same thing that the ADL is saying right now. You are using AIPAC talking points. We tried to warn you. Those of us over at RBN, we tried to tell you months ago that she was bad on this issue. But we were the bad people. We warned you guys. She had problematic statements about this issue. And yes, she deleted some of those tweets. But here we are again. They are not calling for the genocide of Jewish people. But you have actively happening right now, you have the state of Israel committing a genocide against the Palestinian people, where they are now counting over 20,000 people dead. All of these children, but you want to talk about a statement. What did I tell you about distraction in the PR machine? They get you to focus on something else, so you're not really focusing on what's happening right in front of your face. If you're focused on a phrase, you're not paying attention to the actual genocide that is right in front of you.
Anyone being told, go away, do not exist, is anathema to me. And I hope that you will, I have heard you enough tonight. When you do see, I trust very much your heart and your mind, Lauren. You're very, very smart. And all I can say is I hope that you will go to that part of the world someday and do see with your own eyes, because I do believe the situation is in many ways, and many of the things that you said, it's like, no, that's not the fact. And I believe that when there is a greater appreciation for the larger story, I believe you will hold it in your heart and will perhaps see some of the things that you just said a little differently. That would be my response.
Honey, then it gets, now here's the thing, because neoliberal tears, I think this may have been the clip that kicked it all off. There's multiple clips circulating around on Twitter. Neoliberal tears said, Lord Jesus. This is the comment about the occupation.
That you just described were simply not the case. Israel is not an occupying force in Gaza. Israelis can't even go into Gaza.
Israel is the occupier. They are the ones in power. They are the ones that control all the resources. The Palestinian people can't even move freely. So you may not like that statement, Marianne, but that is what is happening here. The Palestinian people are not in power. Gaza doesn't even have a military. They've destroyed the hospitals. They've destroyed the schools. They've kidnapped children. The IDF has kidnapped Palestinian children and have held them in prison for years. We saw the rest of this. Now, here's what happened. She actually issued another response. The PR machine came out. Even Danny Haifong commented on this. He said, Marianne Williamson says Israel doesn't occupy Gaza, despite controlling the flow of people, water, food, and fuel, ethnically cleansing the land with genocide, Gaza being a concentration camp. She's riding with Biden on this issue. I mean, at this point, what is the big difference there, right? Tomorrow, you will see the video, the interview I did with Norm Finkelstein, where he breaks down how Israel actually goes in and mows the lawn, right? So Marianne's going to ignore that as well. So here comes the PR machine. There's great misrepresentation of my views, hardly new, bouncing around the internet today. And I'm posting my videos on the subject for those who are interested. I won't be getting into conversation about it on Twitter, but I'd like my actual work to be represented rather than the words taken out of context. I'm not expecting everyone to agree with me, nor is that my goal. But the projection and slander aren't the stuff of meaningful debate. The words are words that Marianne said in that interview. People aren't making these things up. You did an interview with a mega influencer who is mad popular on Instagram, and that shit went viral. You have no one to blame for your statements but yourself. This is not the first time. Before October 7th, before this all even kicked off, she said that Israel has a right to defend itself. She deleted that tweet. So she issues her statement here. She's showing her, this is a video that she shared to talk about this issue.
President John F. Kennedy said that if we don't put an end to war, war will put an end to us. And let us make no mistake about it. The situation currently in the Middle East, if uncontrolled, could lead to World War III. The bombing must end. We need a ceasefire. And President Biden's commitment to Israel should not include more and more commitment to brute force, more and more commitment to military action, more and more commitment such as sending ships, like that's going to protect our national interest or even theirs. I call for a ceasefire not only as a candidate for the Democratic nomination for the presidency. I am a Jew, remember, and I understand the fury of the Israelis in this moment. But this is not a moment for us to think only in terms of an alliance with this people or that people. We must be in alliance with humanity right now.
I'm in alliance with the oppressed. I don't stand with the oppressor. We can't talk about this as though both sides are equal. They're not. One is in power. One has been occupying. One has been oppressing. The other has not. You can't talk about them as though they're on the same level when people are being oppressed. You just cannot. This is like, we can go back to the slavery issue. Would you have put the slave and the slave masters on the same level? No. One has power and control and the other does not.
This is a call to all humanity to find another way. This is a call to all of us to get out of our silos, to realize that an innocent citizen of Israel and an innocent citizen of Gaza, they are both victims of a mentality which does not serve. And it is that mentality which we must move beyond. We need a ceasefire. And every voice that calls for a ceasefire should be given the chance to speak. All of us must remove the hatred for anyone from our hearts right now and speak out of love for humanity and the future of humanity. We need a ceasefire, and we need it now. And when the bombing ends, then we can talk about what to do from an internationalist perspective to save those hostages. And it could just be to save the world. Ceasefire. Ceasefire now.
So, this was one of the videos that she added to show people how she feels about this issue. This has nothing to do with what you said in the interview. That is the problem, Marianne. I didn't see anyone on Twitter saying that she doesn't approve of a ceasefire. No, we're talking about the rhetoric that you have over from the river to the sea. We're talking about the rhetoric that you have saying that Israel is not occupying Gaza when they control it. They control everything that comes in and comes out. Neoliberal tears. Williamson quoted Theodore Herzl, the father of modern Zionism, saying, "Is it true that we aspire to our ancient land, but what we want in that ancient land is a new blossoming of the Jewish spirit?" Williamson said she admires Herzl. It's the father of Zionism. He was a whole person thinker, addressing the spiritual as well as the political aspirations of the Jews. He was not religious. And that's what the new Zionism needs to concern itself with today. Does Williamson have a real shot at the presidency? Neoliberal Tears tweeted this. She was retweeting what Marianne said here about a misrepresentation of her views. See, sometimes I don't think Marianne remembers some of the things that she said. How do you admire Theodore Herzl? Theodore Herzl wanted an ethno-state. That's who you admire? I asked Norm Finkelstein if he would be interested in having this discussion with Marianne Williamson. You'll have to watch the interview tomorrow to see what he said. Let's go to some of the comments here. Robert says Katie Halper had a lawyer on saying that means throwing off oppression. Thank you, Robert. Hector says Lauren is fully based. She knows what's up. By the way, I heard that after the fact, Lauren did come in and defend Marianne. Like I told you, the PR machine, they went to work. They went to work. Thank you for the super chat, Sparky. Israel steers tourists to Putakim village type tours where they don't see the plight of Palestinians. Just like any tour that you would go to in any city here in the United States, you're not going to see the hood. The tour bus, the duck tour isn't going to take you to the projects. Thank you for this as well, Sparky. From the river to the sea was originally an Israeli Zionist chant. Why isn't it okay for Palestinians to chant this phrase? Thank you for this one as well. Marianne's extra condescending to the interviewer. Thank you for this one. Marianne said she'd been with many Palestinians in the West Bank. Is she a woman of easy virtue? I don't think she meant it that way, Sparky. I see you trying to do a jokey joke. JB says Marianne Williamson just mowed the lawn nicely. Ouch. Thank you, Sparky. It's becoming evident that most Israelis killed on October 7th were killed by Israeli police and the Israeli Defense Force, not Hamas. And thank you for this as well, Sparky. Marianne is so full of it. Well, there's someone else who's full of it. Breaking Points had a discussion with RFK Jr. about Israel and Gaza. That video posted earlier today. Someone sent this to me and said, you got to hear this load of bullshit. What I find particularly interesting is that RFK Jr. can have this discussion with Breaking Points, but he refuses to have this discussion with a non-Zionist Jew who's actually been to Gaza, right? He refuses to have this discussion with people like Max Blumenthal. He only seems to be willing to have the discussion with people who don't have the experience that someone like Max has, Dan Cohen has, etc. Pay attention to that. Let's get into it. He says wild things during this interview we're going to debunk.
So President Biden's administration, they have said that they have no red lines for the state of Israel and their conduct in this war. Do you have any red lines for Israel?
Well, the red lines are that, you don't deliver, you do everything you can, which I think Israel is doing right now to avoid civilian casualties. But,
First lie. Can we count the lies? Does someone want to tally the lies? First lie, Israel's doing everything that they can to avoid civilian casualties. Joe Biden is admitting himself they are indiscriminately bombing. CNN finally went into Gaza without the IDF and reported back that they're dropping dummy bombs. They said that it is appalling what is happening in Gaza. Lie number one. Who wants to keep count in the chat?
There's collateral damage in every war, and they're fighting an implacable enemy. I mean, I don't think there's any country in the world that would go as far as Israel has gone to not invade Gaza. I mean, Israel was being bombed by Hamas.
Pause. You notice something here, right? This is where he's starting to become uncomfortable. One of the things I've noticed about RFK Jr. is that he likes to cherry pick facts, right? So he'll say some things that are true, but he cherry picks them, meaning he picks the facts that actually help the narrative that he's trying to project. And he leaves other important facts out. Also, he throws in some lies here and there, right? So he's cherry picking. He's going to tell you they did everything that they could to try to avoid going into Gaza. Really? After Netanyahu stood up in front of the UN and talked about the greater Israel plan, where Gaza was, where Palestine, they were all gone? Everything that they could, though? Lie number two.
Took over Gaza. Israel walked out of Gaza. There's no occupation of Gaza.
The blockade, though.
Well,
lie number three. See, you can tell this is where he's starting to get nervous. There's no occupation of Gaza. The same shit that Marianne Williamson is saying. Again, they control the resources. They decide if they could come in and go out. You got all these people crammed in this dense space. You limit their water. You limit their electricity. You don't even give them clean water.
there's a blockade because Hamas declared war on Israel and sent suicide bombers off. So they put up a fence. So is there, that's like a
pause. What does Hamas have to do with the illegal occupations in the West Bank? What did Hamas have to do? There was no Hamas in 1948, right? So why were the Palestinian people pushed out then?
It's like the guy who kills his parents and then throws himself on the mercy of the court because he's an orphan. For them to say that they're blockaded, they're blockaded, and it's not just Israel that's blockading them; it's Egypt. Well, everybody has a problem with Hamas. In fact, after the 73 war, after the 67 war, Israel tried to give Hamas back to Egypt, and Egypt didn't want to take it because
Gaza.
Gaza back to Egypt. Egypt didn't want to take it because of the high level of sort of religious militant Islam that Egypt considered a threat to its own government.
Let
me just finish.
Sure.
Israel, Hamas took over in 2006.
Right.
And they immediately started shelling Israel.
Israel removed the people from their homes, starting with the Nakba. There was no Hamas in 2006. You see this? You understand?
So they sent on average 2,000 rockets a year on civilian populations, and their charter and their public statements day after day are it's against Islamic law for them to even negotiate with Israel except as a ruse. It says that in their charter. The only satisfaction for them, the only goal, is to annihilate Israel and kill every Jew, not just in Israel, but all around the world. So,
that is a lie. That is an outright lie. This guy is repeating AIPAC talking points, ADL talking points, but clearly he's getting his rhetoric from AIPAC. I'm not kidding. It's almost as if he actually went to one of those, an AIPAC convention, and just repeats the same thing over and over that he heard at the convention. And someone tried to tell me earlier today that he's been to Gaza. He has not been to Gaza. He may have been to the West Bank, but he has not been to Gaza. Why is that? Why is he having this conversation with two people who have not been to Gaza and are not Jewish, to my knowledge? But he's not willing to have this conversation with someone who has been to Gaza and is Jewish and is anti-Zionist. Why is he avoiding Max Blumenthal? Why is he afraid? If you're so secure and comfortable with your facts, you have nothing to fear.
Oh, Israel, instead of going in and attacking, if Mexico elected a communist government and the communist government began sending shells onto civilian populations in San Antonio and Houston and say, we're going to retake Texas, which they have a legitimate claim to, we're going to retake it. How long would it take us to go in there? It wouldn't take us very long. We would go in and we would do whatever it took to take out the people who are sending the shells. And Israel, instead of...
The United States government does not run Mexico. What is the United States government? Mexico has their own things, right? So Mexico has their own things for their people. Okay. The difference is the United States government is not occupying Mexican people. We don't have them in a concentration camp. Israel has the Palestinian people. They have them in Gaza in a concentration camp. So this is why you can't do that comparison. And he's all over the place, by the way. He's already starting to fumble.
Doing that, Israel did something extraordinary, which is it invested in an Iron Dome, which is to defend itself again, just to live with missiles. There's thousands, tens of thousands.
See how he's all over the place? He starts talking about one thing. Now he's going to switch to something else. Who paid for that Iron Dome? Who sent them funding for the Iron Dome? The U.S. government did.
Of Israelis that on that part of Israel that have been raised in bomb shelters. Who would put up with that? There's
so,
nobody
Bobby,
in the world.
No one here is excusing the actions of Hamas, but I think you would agree that one atrocity does not justify another. So how can you, hold on. Hold on. How can
See how quick he is to,
How can you say, though, how can you say?
But calling it an atrocity.
I haven't finished.
By the way, we ain't even halfway through it yet, but he totally made himself look foolish during this discussion. Because what Crystal is telling him, and she does push back on him, what she's telling him is like, look, neither myself or Sagar defend Hamas here. And he jumps in immediately. Can't even wait. Let her finish the sentence. Jumps in immediately. Let me come in and defend Israel.
My question.
Right, go ahead.
How can you say that Israel is doing everything they can to avoid civilian death when the civilian death toll, even by Israeli estimates, and this is the low, this is the best possible number you could put on it, is 61% innocent civilians, thousands of children, thousands of women. That's worse than the combination of every 20th century conflict combined. So how can you look at that and combine with the complete siege of 2.2 million people and say that they are doing everything they can to protect civilian life?
First of all, what you said is not true. We killed 750,000 civilians in Iraq.
She's talking percentage-wise.
What?
She's talking percentage-wise.
The percent.
Let me tell you what RFK Jr. is doing here. We killed 750,000 civilians in Iraq, so it's okay for Israel to kill all the people they're killing in Gaza. Does that sound okay to you guys? We were supposed to learn from those atrocities. We were supposed to learn from Hiroshima, Iraq, Afghanistan. You don't continue to do that.
Percentage of the average kill rate in Afghanistan, Mosul, in those battles in modern warfare is about 8 or 9 to 1, civilians to military.
And you think that's fine?
80%
Well, civilian death, you're fine with that?
I don't think a single civilian death is fine. Not a single, but when we went into Germany to get out the Nazis, we killed 2 million Germans. We bombed Dresden.
Which is why
we killed Germans. So it's okay for Israel to kill Palestinian people.
And actually, there's an analysis that just came out that showed the bombing of northern Gaza has been more devastating and more destructive than our bombing of Dresden. I would also say after World War II, that's why we put in place things like the Geneva Conventions, to make sure that we did as much as we could to protect civilian life. So when you say, let me give you a specific report that you can respond to. The Washington Post, we can put this up on the screen, guys. This is the second element.
R2.
The Washington Post just reported that Israel dropped U.S. supplied white phosphorus in an attack in Lebanon in a way that is inconsistent with the laws of war, directly impacting a civilian population. Are these, now you might say, look, maybe the report's in dispute, maybe we need to go and investigate, but is this or any other of Israeli conduct in this war, is this something that you think should be investigated for potential violations of international law?
Again, if Israel dropped white phosphorus on civilian populations illegally, then they should be prosecuted for war crimes.
Yeah.
But I don't think there's strong evidence that they've done that, and Israel absolutely denies it. There is a...
So now all of a sudden, the newspapers are incorrect, right, Bobby Kennedy? Because it's bad press for Israel. I don't think that Israel has actually done that. Really? But I bet you if that article said that Hamas did that, I bet you he would believe it without a doubt and he wouldn't question it. This guy's a puppet. RFK Jr. is fooling a lot of people. Like, I don't know how else. I know some people have walked away from his campaign, but RFK Jr. is fooling a lot of people.
There are legal ways to use white phosphorus because it's used, in war, which is as a concealant. And Israel says that's what it's doing. Here's what Israel has done.
Israel says it, so it must be true. But if the Palestinian people say anything, you should not believe it.
Israel has calls people before they bomb them. Nobody else in the world does that. It's made 20,000 live calls. So somebody, an Arab-speaking IDF member who calls the landlord, they have the telephone numbers of everybody in Gaza.
The schools and the refugee camps that were bombed were not called. There was no call to warn those people. This is an outright lie. And let's be clear, if it were Russia that did these things, like if Russia bombs a hospital or a school, oh, the United States government is livid. Anthony Blinken says these are war crimes. But when Israel does these things, all of a sudden it's okay. It's not a war crime. They don't put that pressure on them.
Now, there's a lot of connectivity problems, so they can't always
barely sell access right now.
Let me finish. They've made 20,000 live calls with people telling, here's what's going to happen. You need to move out. In your neighborhood, on your building. They've sent 1.2 million robocalls. They've sent 1.2 million pamphlets. The pamphlets are color-coded for date and for time so that you don't see an old pamphlet and say, oh, this won't apply to me. So people know when that building is going to get bombed. And they do something nobody else in the world does because they invented it, which is they send in roof knockers, which is a projectile that hits the roof 2 hours before they bomb the building to warn the people in that building to get out because they're going to bomb it.
AIPAC told him that. Okay. So the children that were pulled out from the schools were not warned. They were not warned. They have just been indiscriminately bombing all over the place. There's no warning. What are you talking about? Maybe they may have done that before in the past, but you cannot sit up here and tell me those kids that were in those schools were not warned. They told the people to leave the North and go to the South. Then they started bombing the South. And RFK Jr. will sit up here and lie through his teeth to defend Israel. He's not running for president of the United States. He's running for prime minister of Israel. This guy is a fraud. And he's been conning a lot of people. He's in the back pocket of AIPAC. This guy's not going to be any different than any president that we've already had.
In warning the civilians, they're also warning Hamas. And so it makes it much more difficult. And, the fact there's many, many nations in the world that would just go and flatten the whole place, which Israel could do.
Which they do want to do. Jesus Christ.
It doesn't have to go in there and put IDF soldiers at risk in hand-to-hand combat. This is Hamas has made a stand. They're putting civilians in the way. What is it?
When you sign up to be an IDF soldier, you take on that risk. Just like when you join the army, you take on that risk. If you become a police officer, you take on that risk that you are putting your life at stake as a part of the job.
Israel's supposed to do. We can't leave Hamas in there.
But Bobby, I don't think we should accept that from any state, Israel or any other. And I mean, they have rendered. Hold on. They've rendered Gaza City uninhabitable at this point. And there's been reports documenting that some of the procedures that you're talking about that they used in previous wars, they're not using this time. They've emphasized this attack on quote unquote power targets, which are things like civilian infrastructure and high-rise apartment buildings, not to get Hamas, but to create a, quote, shock in the civilian population. In addition, as I mentioned before, you have a collective punishment of 2.2 million people who are having their access to water, food, fuel, medicine blocked right now by Israel. This also appears to be in violation of the Geneva Conventions. Do you think that it's acceptable to impose a siege on the entire civilian population in Gaza?
If there's a
Not to mention, 90% of the water is dirty? Anyway, before October 7th, 90% of the water is dirty. RFK Jr. is an environmental lawyer. He's okay with people getting dirty water. Didn't he fight for communities to not receive dirty water in other parts of the world? But when it comes to the Palestinian people in Gaza, it's okay for them to have dirty water. It's okay for them to have disease. It's okay for them to have, which used to be a caloric diet. It was okay for them to have that. It's okay for them for Israel to turn off the electricity when they feel like it. It's okay for that. Hospitals need electricity. Could you imagine you're trying to perform surgery and then it's like, oh, I only got these 2 hours of electricity. If they leave it on for this long, don't know if they're going to turn it back on again. RFK Jr. is okay with that. RFK Jr. is doing the same thing that AIPAC does, which is let's start this with October 7th. And let's make people think that the Palestinian people are the problem, not the oppressed.
First of all, I don't think that's happening. Let me explain. Second of all, if it violates the Geneva Convention, or if they're deliberately, at any point, anybody is deliberately targeting civilians, they should be prosecuted and they should be jailed and the key should be thrown away. And people say this, but I don't see any proof of that. Right now,
it was reported that they were blocking the aid from coming in. That was reported. Not just by independent media, but mainstream media. But he doesn't believe it. He only believes what Israel says. Does anybody not see a problem with this dude? Like, seriously, don't you guys think this is strange? No other presidential candidate fights this hard for a foreign country. He's fighting for them more than he's fighting for you. Pay attention to that.
That people are deliberately targeting civilians.
But the government announced they were doing a complete siege on the 2.2 million.
Yeah, okay. You're talking about the siege. The siege. Now, we did for 10 years. We did collective punishment of Iraq. We actually
I'm not trying to justify that either.
See this? See what he's doing? We did something, so it's okay for Israel to do it.
either here.
Yeah, but why are we just going after the Jews? Why is it only when
Bobby,
Israel does it? Let me just finish this
because
right now.
our tax dollars are going to fund what's going on, and the visuals of these children being killed and losing their parents and the rubble and the total destruction. This is something our government is backing.
I have friends in Gaza. Okay, I have a.
Who's your friend in Gaza? Name a name. I have friends in Gaza. I have a black friend. I know how black people feel. I have a black friend. I know how the Palestinians feel in Gaza. I have a friend in Gaza. Who? And are they still alive?
A friend who is a father of 5 kids, and what he's living through right now is horrible. I have many, many Palestinian friends. I've been to West Bank.
So now it goes from a friend to many, many Palestinian friends. Now he says he's been to the West Bank. This is what I wanted to correct, because someone was saying on Twitter he's been to Gaza. He didn't say that in this interview. He said he went to the West Bank.
Met with the Palestinian leadership. I love the Palestinian people. It's excruciating watching what's happening.
I have a black friend. I love black people.
But why are we blaming Israel? Why are we blaming
they're the ones dropping the bombs?
They have
with our dollars.
They have to get at Hamas. They have to destroy Hamas. And Hamas, unfortunately, built tunnels for themselves, but they did not build bomb shelters for their people. And
let me pause here. I want to give you a comparison. This will be the equivalent to RFK Jr. saying when people were talking about that he says he's for reparations or whatever. Those aren't reparations. I read over it. It's not reparations. That's a couple of tax credits here and there. Okay. It would have been the same thing if RFK Jr. sat here and said, during Jim Crow, I get it. I understand. I know I have a black friend, but why are we blaming Jim Crow laws? Why are we blaming white people for what's happening to black people in this country? You see what I'm saying? There is one group that is in power. There is another group that is oppressed. And you can't sit up here, and I don't care what anybody says. I'll make this very clear. You cannot sit up there and expect oppressed people to lay down to his same standards. Palestinian people can't even peacefully protest without getting shot at. Now, would RFK Jr. tell you the civil rights marches shouldn't have happened? Were black people just supposed to sit here and just take it forever? You can get out of here with all of that. Get out of here with all of it. This guy's a puppet. Just blatant lies. And if he is lying this much about Israel and Gaza, what else is he lying about?
Israel has told people, move to the south. There's food trucks there. There's medicine there. There's fuel there.
But there's not.
It's only not there.
The area
because
they
Hamas
told them to
steals it.
go to is an area that is the size of LAX airport.
Yep.
It is a desert wasteland. There are no UN flag facilities. In fact, if you ask the Secretary General of the UN, he'll tell you there are no safe places in Gaza. You already have 1.8 million people who have been displaced from their homes. So, at what point do you say, okay, it's enough? Because the other piece of this, even if you say, and I know you're not saying this, but even if you say, I don't care about the Palestinian lives, they got to do what they got to do. It's the cost of war. What are you going to do? There's also a lot of evidence that what they're actually doing is fomenting increasing support for Hamas. Because if you think about it, if you're a kid and your parents get blown up, what kind of politics do you think you're going to have when you grow up? Isn't that going to be tremendously radicalizing and incredibly compromising to the security of Israelis alike?
So how would you get rid of Hamas?
Well,
if you're Israel.
Well, I'm not running.
First of all, the focus should not just be on getting rid of Hamas. The focus should be on making sure that the Palestinian people actually are treated as equals, that they have self-determination. If it were me, I'd say give them their damn land back. Okay. But the focus should not just be on Hamas. These people, they have beaten these people. They have tortured these people. They have gone to houses and arrested someone that wasn't the person that they were looking for. So they just took any family member and arrested them. IDF soldiers have kidnapped children. This is all on video. RFK Jr. has seen this stuff, I'm pretty sure, but he's already been spoken to and saying, don't you talk about that already. Don't y'all just think it's kind of strange? All these people, RFK Jr., Bill Ackman, all these people that was connected to Jeffrey Epstein in some way, shape, or form, got the same position when it comes to Israel and Gaza.
For President of the United States, number one. But number two, I think we have a model for this in a sense from the way we went in and approached bin Laden. So it was a targeted raid. If you're actually going to do this, you do a counter-terror operation where you go in a targeted way. You create a wedge between Hamas and the civilian population. And we see how this works in the past because previously in Israeli society, when there were pathways to peace that were on the table, where the Palestinian civilian population felt that they had a chance at negotiating some sort of a peaceful outcome, guess what? Support for Hamas falls off a cliff. It's almost a one-to-one relationship with the more brutal the response from Israelis, the more support for radicalism that there is.
You can filibuster.
I'm not filibustering. You asked me a question. I'm trying to answer it.
Yeah, I think you're filibustering. You're not answering the question. You're saying drive a wedge. Well, of course Israel's trying to drive a wedge.
By offering some other path that's not terrorism and not violence.
What is that path?
It's a path to two-state solution or some sort of a just and lasting peace.
And the Palestinians not only have rejected that, but Hamas, its whole purpose was the
Notice how they always pivoted back to Hamas. This is AIPAC again, 101, AIPAC 101. Let's turn it back into Hamas.
reason that Hamas was able to get all this popular support and take over was because of its opposition to any negotiation.
Hamas just came out and said that they support Israel's PLO and recognize Israel's right to exist. On the other hand, you have the ambassador.
First of all, one thing I will say here, KRYSTAL did push back quite well against RFK Jr. But have you guys noticed how incredibly rude he has been to her when it comes to this particular topic? This isn't the first time he came on Breaking Points. He's been on here before. For whatever reason, when it is this issue, he doesn't want to let you get a word out. He wants to say all these damn lies that you're not supposed to push back on. And the moment you start speaking about it, he wants to cut you off. That's the defense mechanism. That's him trying to defend the state of Israel. This is what he's been told to do, probably what he's been trained to do. Very telling.
The Israeli ambassador to the UK saying we will absolutely no to a two-state solution.
I just cannot let you tell that. It's just not true.
It just happened.
Ismail Haniyeh was on TV on Al Jazeera yesterday saying we're going to do this again and again and again. We will never negotiate.
Which we covered and which is disgusting. But there's what about the facts? But
I told you he cherry picks facts. So he points out what was said on Al Jazeera, what the gentleman said on Al Jazeera, but KRYSTAL was telling him we covered that too. We covered both sides. You only want to cherry pick the things that make Palestinians look bad and make the state of Israel look good. And that's what he's doing.
Hold on. What about the fact that Netanyahu and his government have said absolutely no? They built up Hamas to try to thwart any sort of Palestinian statehood. Where's the focus on that?
I'm not defending Netanyahu. And I don't co-sign, what Netanyahu and Likud do. Israel.
Yes, you do. And you're doing it now.
It's a divided country. 80 or 20% of the population were on the street demonstrating against Netanyahu. What I'm saying is Hamas is a criminal enterprise.
Sure.
Yes. The Palestinian, and you talk about solutions for the Palestinian people. The Palestinian people are arguably the most pampered people by international aid organizations in the history of the world. Are you kidding me? No,
Even before this war, 78% of people in Gaza said they had, not enough food to eat.
Right. And why is that? Why are you blaming
Well,
Israel?
in part, it's Hamas, and in part, it's the fact that Israel imposed a blockade and talked about putting them on a diet.
If your neighbor, first of all, Israel has.
Why are you blaming Israel for the reason why there was a caloric diet in reference to the Palestinians in Gaza, when Israel was they're the ones that control what foods come in and what comes out? Do you guys believe this? Do you believe this? This guy is not dumb on purpose. He knows exactly, he's not dumb. He's doing this on purpose. He knows exactly what he's doing. That's just like if you have a parent-child relationship and the parent obviously is responsible for feeding the child. So the parent decides not to feed the child, not to buy groceries. So in RFK Jr.'s, his position, basically, instead of blaming the parent who's supposed to be allowing the food to come in to the child, you're supposed to point fingers at the child. How does that make any sense? Now, if I was Crystal, I would have used different language. I would have called Israel a fucking oppressor. And I would have called Gaza and the Palestinian people the oppressed. So my language would have been very different. And I would have made those comparisons in reference to the civil rights movement. I would have made the comparison. Because I think the thing is, you got to change some of the vocabulary. Like I said, she does push back, but you got to change some of the vocabulary for it to really, really sink in to RFK Jr. supporters. Because he's not going to try to take this in at all. He's already bought and paid for. Dude's got a super PAC funded by billionaires, doesn't give a fuck. Okay? But who you do need to reach is his supporters.
Has no obligation. I mean, Israel built 3,000 hothouses and gave them for greenhouses. That would have made Gaza completely food self-sufficient, gave it to them as a gift, offered to rebuild the port of Gaza to make it the Singapore of the West. Hamas said, no, we don't want Jew money, we don't want Jew ideas. And what do? The international aid agencies have given Gaza more than 10 times per capita what we gave to rebuild all of Europe after the Marshall Plan. They've gotten $8,300 per capita
and Israel receives $8.3 billion from the U.S. government every year. But I don't see you complaining about that.
Person in Gaza. We rebuilt Europe with $621 per capita in Europe, and we rebuilt it. What did they do with that money? Instead of using it to make this, Gaza's this beautiful country, white sand beaches, it should be a paradise. Hamas said, we don't want that. They take virtually all of that money and they steal it. So the top 5.
Really? All of it? What does that have to do? And let's remember, Israel themselves admitted that the tunnel under that hospital that the IDF soldier was showing everyone around on video, admitted themselves on CNN that they built those tunnels, the ones that were underneath the hospital. So the point that I want to make here again is, so they gave them money and he says they didn't use it properly. What does that have to do with Israel controlling the resources though? If they still control what comes in, what difference does that make? Guys,
the top 5 leaders of Hamas are billionaires. Ismail Haniyeh has $5 billion, according to Forbes.
But Bobby, again,
we got billionaires that lead shit in this country too, Bobby. We got billionaires that lead companies, that lead things in this country too, but it's not like it trickles down. So now is RFK Jr. actually going to sit here and actually preach some type of trickle down economics bullshit, which we all know from Ronald Reagan, it does not work? So because you got 5 billionaires that were a part of something, they're supposed to let this wealth trickle down. You know that does not happen. You know that does not happen. And I want to know who those billionaires are, by the way. Start naming some names. Because to me, it just seemed like you just coming up with bullshit on the fly.
Let me just finish. No, because you you are making a statement that is just wrong. It's not Israel's fault that Gaza is poverty stricken.
Yes, it is. You guys see that? Let me wait a minute. It gets worse. Wait till this part. This is the worst part.
Agencies have given Gaza more than 10 times per capita what we gave to rebuild all of Europe after the Marshall Plan. They've gotten $8,300 per capita, every person in Gaza. We rebuilt Europe with $621 per capita in Europe, and we rebuilt it. What did they do with that money? Instead of using it to make this, Gaza is this beautiful country, white sand beaches, it should be a paradise. Hamas said, we don't want that. They take virtually all of that money and they steal it. So the top 5 guys, the top 5 leaders of Hamas are billionaires. Ismail Haniyeh has $5 billion, according to Forbes.
But Bobby, again,
wait, let me just finish. No, because
I heard one name. I want to know who those other 4 are.
You are making a statement that is just wrong. It's not Israel's fault that Gaza is poverty-stricken. Gaza should be one of the wealthiest states on the Mediterranean.
They have no control over their own territory.
Of course,
Israel
if you go to war,
everything that comes in and goes out.
If you go to war, no, Crystal.
Can I just say something, you guys? And I'm making a guess here, but I'm willing to bet RFK Jr. is actually an AIPAC plant. I think RFK Jr. is a plant. I don't think he's real. Like, I really do feel like this guy was just kind of put in to give you the option or make you think that you have another option out of Democrat and Republican, which I totally think you should get out of the 2-party system for those who are new who don't realize. But I think RFK Jr. is a total plant. He's presented there to make you think you're going to get something different, but you're actually not. He's just very much a part of the status quo. He has billionaire money coming into his campaign. He has a super PAC. And what killed me was all the ex-Bernie people that were like, oh, don't worry about the money. He's got to raise money somehow. Now, all of a sudden, we're going to pretend like billionaire money doesn't have an impact on the way that you vote and the way that you pass policy and legislation in this country. No, you cannot sit up here and fall in love with the Kennedy name and this facade. I think this guy's a plant. I don't think he's real. And I think he is very dangerous. I really do.
So why are you blaming? Why do you insist on blaming Israel rather than blaming Hamas?
I do blame Hamas, but you know what else, Bobby? Our tax dollars do not go to Hamas. They go to the Netanyahu government.
And
it's our bombs, 22,000 of which they're being bombed, dropped on the civilian population right now.
You know what most of our tax dollars have gone for? For the Iron Dome, which is a way of not invading Gaza. Our country and Israel for 16 years have expended this huge amount of money to try not to go into Gaza, while Gaza sent 2,000 rockets a year, suicide bombers, and of course Israel's going to
fight. How many times has Israel come in and quote unquote mowed the lawn?
They've gone in 5 times, and
So you heard that, right? This is where he gets in trouble. Crystal, that was a good question Crystal asked. She said, how many times has Israel gone in and mowed the lawn? He said they've gone in 5 times. But didn't he tell you earlier in this conversation that they don't go into Gaza? Marianne Williamson said the same thing, right? He's okay with that. He's not good on this issue. This is why he doesn't want to have the conversation with Max. This is why he doesn't want to debate anyone on this issue, because he fumbles over his own words. He switches from one thought to the next thought. This is his weak spot. This really is. That's why he don't want to talk to anybody that's had that other side of the experience.
Every time they've signed a peace agreement with Hamas, and every time they violated that peace agreement. Let me just.
Israel also has been killing Palestinians in West Bank. But hold on.
Listen,
I want to move forward.
If Mexico attacked us and we built a fence, would you blame us for caging in Mexico?
We don't control. Wait a minute. See, I told you, you can't use that as an example. We're not occupying people in Mexico. That's a big difference. Are we telling them first of all, we have a border. Yes, some people do sneak through the border. We know about all that. But the difference is we are not occupying the people in Mexico. People that live in Mexico can leave Mexico. Okay, can I be real here? People that live in Mexico can leave Mexico. The people in Gaza are trapped. They can't even go into Egypt. It doesn't work this way. And another thing, he's starting to violate the personal bubble. Like you can't be, with the finger pointing and the hand this close. People have bubbles. There are these things called like an invisible bubble that's around you. And it's like when you're having debate discussion with people, you don't violate that space. He didn't poke the bubble too many times for me. He's getting very angry. He's a plant.
Well, I don't know what it is, but everything in your mind is telling you to blame Israel,
Bobby,
instead of blaming Hamas.
Bobby, hold on.
Let me just finish.
Because I want to get to the end game. Then Sagar has some questions for you on free speech that I want to make sure we get to, because I think this is important as well. What Netanyahu has said and what he's tasked his senior advisor with.
Talk to me about Netanyahu.
But
he can't, guys. I honestly think after this interview, RFK Jr. is done. He's not on the ballot in any states. Not on the ballot in any states yet. I know that is a task as an independent candidate, but it kind of doesn't look too good that Cornel West already got ballot access already. Just got on the state. And I'm not saying you have to support Cornel West, but let's look at the big picture here. Jill Stein, we already know, was on the ballot in at least like 18 states. She was on the ballot in over 40 states last time, and she'll get it this time. Someone said Sagar's about to jump him. This is just, woo!
Let me answer your question.
I haven't even asked the question. Let me ask the question.
Let me finish answering your last question.
Can we put this element up on the screen? Netanyahu has said that he wants to, quote unquote, thin out the population of Gaza to a minimum. There is simultaneously a proposal that is being shopped here in D.C. with some bipartisan support that would use our aid dollars to countries in the region to pressure them to accept Palestinian refugees out of Gaza to enable Netanyahu's plan of, quote unquote, thinning out the population. I'm sure you know he has been very cagey about what he wants the future of Gaza to look like. What do you want the future of Gaza to look like? And is there any circumstance where you would support pushing neighboring countries to resettle Palestinians?
No, I think, listen, I don't, as I said, I don't co-sign anything for Netanyahu or for Likud.
But he's
That's
in
not what I'm
charge.
saying.
So I know, but he's
Well,
the
how would
person.
you deal with him if you're
How
the
would you
president?
deal with it? What would be
says
your
no.
plan for the future of Gaza? If
I think right now, I'm all ears. Is how do you get rid of Hamas? I think you have to get rid of Hamas. Hamas is a criminal organization that is making the 5 leaders of it are all billionaires.
See, he has to go back to Hamas. Crystal is asking you, what is the plan? What would you do if you were president? The reality is RFK Jr. doesn't have a plan. And that's what this interview exposed. The only thing that he can do is criticize Hamas, but he can't present a solution. And that is the weak spot with this campaign.
By the way, Yasser Arafat died a billionaire. Mahmoud Abbas a billionaire. His 2 kids who run West Bank have $750 million. It is a criminal enterprise where they are stealing everything from the people of Gaza, and then they raise them from kindergarten to kill Jews. I saw the 43-minute film of the GoPros and the body cams, and
a film that was probably shown in the AIPAC convention.
The things that I saw on there, the rape, the burning people alive, no matter what happened to you for the rest of your life, no matter how abused you were, no matter how, you could never act that way.
So you're not going to call out the fact that the IDF has done these things to Palestinian people? They have tortured Palestinian prisoners. Black people, let me say something to you. When RFK Jr. tells you he has a reparation plan, there ain't no damn reparations plan. That's a couple of tax credits. Don't fall for this game. Don't fall for this game. If he feel this way about Palestinian people, he damn sure don't give a fuck about you. Okay? Thank you.
These kids are being raised as serial killers. They're
Does
being
that
raised.
make them legitimate targets?
Well, the terrorists, yes. Right?
I'm talking about the terrorists.
Does that make them legitimate targets?
No, that's not what I'm saying, Crystal. What I'm saying is Hamas is
Notice they all say it that way too. Marianne Williamson said it that way too. Hamas is always that way. It's not just Hamas. It's Hamas putting emphasis on it.
Oppressing its own people. It's stealing from them and it's turning them into, it's taking away their childhood instead of, just distributing this huge amount of money that they've gotten, building a wonderful culture and society and economic prosperity for them. Instead, it has one purpose, which is to annihilate Jews. And kids, their schools are named after Jew killers. Their streets are named after Jew killers.
AIPAC talking point.
They are
paid bounties to kill Jews.
A majority of Palestinians in Gaza support a two-state solution.
Well, the polls I've seen right now, I'm all for a two-state solution. Show me how.
Honey. This mofo don't have no plan, okay? I'm just gonna say it as vivid as I can. This dude has no plan. He don't have no plan in reference to this issue because he don't know what the hell he talking about. He just stumbling all over himself. Very revealing interview. Very revealing. This guy's a plant. If you want to see the full interview, because I know we're going to do call-in as well. If you want to see the full interview, it's on Breaking Points, RFK Jr. challenge on Israel, free speech, and Epstein. So there's different parts of this interview, not just the Israel part, but he really did expose himself there. Like, I'm sorry, there's a weak spot there. And I want to show you breaking news that also came through in reference to this particular issue. See, this is something else that RFK Jr. is probably not going to tell you that you need to see. Israeli troops mistakenly killed 3 hostages in Gaza. IDF has reported this. That was announced 8:11 p.m. Eastern time tonight. He's a plant. I'm going to take a quick break. I'll come back. We'll head on over to call-in because I haven't done call-in this week, and I'd love to hear from you guys. Eric's going to jump in for just a second. Thanks, Eric. I think we just have to read. Okay, I think you have to read all the comments. Sorry.
Oh, yeah, no problem. We will read comments in chats and all that good stuff. So like Sabrina said, this is the part of the show where we give her a little break, and then we'll come back to call-in. Here, I can actually put the call-in link in the chat just in case anyone wants a head start on that. And then Sabrina usually pins it to the top. And so let's see what that looks like today. Let me close this, open this one, and call in tonight. She'll show this again when she comes back too. RFK, Michelle Wu, and more. And yeah, you can, we always want to hear what you think. You can tell us if you think RFK Jr. is an AIPAC plant, or I'm not sure about that theory. It's an interesting one. I feel like he's kind of running for president as like a hobby. He's like this rich guy who's looking. He's kind of almost desperate for something to do, and he just kind of goes from thing to thing. But he's obviously in the pocket of Shmuley and AIPAC and all that. But I mean, he's an avid capitalist. He's one thing that was funny during the interview, I thought it was kind of like the battle of the interrupters, where he and Crystal would kind of be interrupting each other, But he definitely goes on. There's a rhetorical tool, a debate thing called a Gish Gallop, which where you just keep throwing out assertions just one after the other, and so you try to like overwhelm your debate opponent by just throwing these things out and not and not giving them a chance. And there's the whole thing too. Ashura says, I'm killing Sabrina's conspiracy thoughts. We can talk about it in call in, Ashura. And in the Gish Gallop, you keep you just keep doing that, and then you do things like when someone tries to correct you, then you accuse them of interrupting you, and there's all these things that you do especially when you don't have a good argument. I mean, we saw Max Blumenthal give his talk, which was awesome to see him in person. And his stuff is just backed up by facts, and it's just really tight. And you could stop Max at any point and say, well, what's your proof of that? And he could show you easily just facts and journalism and just lots of things to back it up. But yeah, the other thing I'm struck by is just like this isn't a close call. This is about just simple, basic justice for the Palestinians, and they have not, gotten anything near to that. It's kind of, when Corey and I did a set of videos that are on my channel called Crime and Politics, and like the first one of the whole set I called Ridiculous, and this was like a couple of years ago, and just calling out like all these things that are they're not even close calls. It's just how far the system has come. All right, let's hit some of these super chats. Thanks for this one, Wired TARDIS. Xi Jinping must seen San Francisco. Thanks for that one. Thanks for this, Wadali Vegan. RFK was killed by Sirhan, a Palestinian. He can only think revenge. Yeah, I mean, that's another theory that, you can think about. Thanks for this one, Marvin Vargas. Sabby news segment. Can you see the lie? Yeah, well, there was no shortage of them from Mr. Kennedy there. Next to this one, Sparky. Rabbi Shmuley infiltrated RFK Jr.'s campaign and ruined it. Dennis Kucinich, a righteous man leaving the campaign, is proof of that. Yeah, I mean, it was pretty, again, talk about ridiculous and obvious. I mean, they replaced Dennis Kucinich with a former CIA operative. It's like, okay. All right, thanks for this one, Natalie Williams. JFK supported Zionism. He spoke at the Zionists of America convention in 1960. Sorry if I ruined your hero worship, chat. Please forgive me. Yeah, I mean, you're not going to see me playing up the Kennedys. I'm from, where the Kennedys are from here in Massachusetts, and yeah, it's a mystique, and I wouldn't say it's an earned one. And I like this one from the Oracle at Delphi. There isn't a dime's difference between Democrats and Republicans and some independents on American militarism, i.e. foreign policy. And I think that's something we definitely like to hit around here, is that both of these parties are the same. Both of these parties are owned by the billionaires, the MIC, the banksters. And it's, well past time to move past the duopoly. And yeah, I think Dave was counting up the lies in the during the RFK segment. I saw it reached, he was at least to 19, probably more like 99 in the end. Thanks for this super chat, Aoi Zawi. Makes you wonder what kind of dirt Israel has on RFK Jr.'s relationship with Epstein on his island. Enough to make him look like a fool, apparently. Yeah. And thanks for this one. Think before you type. Interesting name. RFK Jr. is pure evil for trying to justify genocide. And thanks for this one. CB, everybody needs someone to defend them the way he defends Israel. Oh, here we go. They reached at least 21. He was counting the lies. And we'll hit this one from the Rockfins. Run out there from Skip M. Thanks for this tipped comment on Rockfin. If you rebuild the country and then put a wall around Germany or Japan, how could they have become what they are today? Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good comment in terms of saying, it's not an analogous situation the way that Germany and Japan were rebuilt after World War II. I mean, this is an ongoing, we call it an occupation. I've heard it referred recently as more of an annexation. because, an occupation is supposed to be short-lived. And so basically, you have the Israelis, it's basically, annexed territory for them. They control it. And that's maybe the biggest thing that I think Crystal could have done a better job at, is just hitting on the point that the Israelis control everything there. They control the resources, the borders, the food, the water, and that's crucial. You have to look at who has the power. And
you gotta.
And then and then I'll always hit my old thing: follow the money. MCDS, money, corruption, demands, and solutions. We all see the corruption. We have to demand an end to it, and we have to push for the real solutions to it. All right, and we are going to be doing call-in.
Let's get going because it's getting late. Call-in link is pinned to the top of the chat, guys. I had to create a new room because I don't know. I think something happened with my phone, but the link is pinned to the top of the chat. Let's go ahead and head on over there. Have a good night. Keep up the fight.